Alright, so Harry, you gonna take minutes?
I guess I had.
Would you like me to? Would you like me to?
You want to also scribble stuff down, and then I'll take and combine the notes.
You
I type it up.
will have a fresh page.
Do you need your?
No, yes.
I would appreciate
That's
that,
the cheat sheet.
because you'll hear more than I will.
Alright, so I'd like to call this meeting to order for Pownal Select Board for special meetings
Sign
for
that
Thursday,
first.
December 5th, 2019. 7 p.m. On the agenda tonight is approval of warrants, public comment, mail, old business for personnel policy, new business, health officer, newsletter, and executive session for legal contractual, then executive session for personnel, and then we'll adjourn.
You had a town hall, right?
So we have to make a motion.
We're not in
for the
November
agenda.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to
Huh?
add
These
something
aren't
to the
initial.
agenda.
Okay,
We're not
we'll
in
look at that.
Under
I mean,
old
some of
business,
them
a
are.
town
Some
hall
of them aren't.
update.
Usually the auditors.
Okay.
Yeah, normally.
So we have a motion to add town hall update under old business. I second it. So is there any other
Any other
changes
discussion
to the
on the
agenda?
agenda?
I'm wondering with executive session, the legal and contractual, if it really falls underneath executive session based on the email that we got from Mr. Graham. I don't know how everybody feels about that.
It was pretty clear from the email that he did not request an executive session. In fact, he told us it was up to the select board. It was up to the select board of whether we wanted it to be, and he said clearly it does not rise to legal contractual. So even the way that it's warned is not the way that not
And
the
if
way
it's
he told us.
findings, why don't we?
Go public with it?
If he stated it.
I'm fine with that.
Because he did state in the email, right?
I would
Today?
rather have everything be public anyway.
Is he here?
I don't think he's here yet.
But it was his email that said.
Yeah.
Well, I can quote that if you want, even if he's
said
not
it
here.
did not.
that's
No, we were
fine.
saying if, you know,
Let me just double
if
check.
he's here.
Oh, yeah,
The
yeah,
email
yeah.
said that it froze.
Do you have the email? Up?
I can say I could bring it up.
It was December 4th.
Here, I
Yeah.
can read it right here.
Yeah, one-
Hi, Marlena and Brian, it is your call on whether or not this goes to executive session. I do not believe it rises to the level of legal or contractual. That's verbatim.
Alright, so we'll remove that from executive and just leave it as
Leave it as open session.
yeah,
Yep.
leave it as open session.
In old business, right?
Could it be new?
Well, I don't think he'll be here by then,
Oh, okay.
because I think he was planning on being here more toward the end of the meeting.
Okay.
So was that a motion?
So that's
Well-
added to the motion.
Yeah, we'll add that
Someone
to the
needs to
motion.
Okay.
So,
Well, no,
you already
Brian.
made the motion.
To,
Well, I
We're-
made the
We're changing
motion.
we're doing motions to change the agenda.
Okay, so let's just,
business.
we made a
Strike
motion
the
to
previous
change the
motion,
agenda,
we'll
yeah.
do a new motion.
Do it as
So I'll
one
make a
again.
motion to change the agenda to include the town hall update under old business and
Forensic audit.
forensic audit update.
Okay. Under new business, right?
Yeah.
Perfect.
I think that's under old business. 'Cause that's old business also.
Okay.
Well, it could be, but I don't know if he'll be here by then.
Right. So
So
new
if we
business would
moved
be
on
first.
past old business into new business and he hasn't shown up
Okay.
yet.
All right.
When he arrives.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I see how it's, normally we go the other way around.
Okay, so that was a motion.
That's where I'm-
By,
Somebody did it aspect. All right.
and seconded by Liz, right?
I didn't catch that. All right.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay, so, is there any more requested changes to the agenda?
Forensic. To,
Okay,
So should
so,
we get rid of mail since there's no mail?
yeah, we can strike mail.
strike mail. New business.
Okay, any other changes?
That's all I got.
I think
All
that's
right.
it.
So, a motion and a second
Brian,
to make the changes to the agenda.
Marlene,
Are there any other discussions? All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, so moving on to approval of the warrants. So for payroll ending 11/24 in the amount of $10,764.11. Payroll ending 12/6 in the amount of $7,620.66. Accounts payable number 22 for on 11/29 for $127,826.38. Accounts payable
I can't
number
write that fast.
15046. I thought that one was a little odd. But 12/6 on 12/6, sorry, for the amount of $11,083.15.
So moved.
All right. Oh.
Second it.
All right. Motion a second to approve the warrants. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
I have to abstain.
Okay.
Because I received reimbursement.
Okay.
And can I get a copy of that after so I can add?
This?
Yeah.
You can have it.
Okay. That way I
All
can-
yours.
Thank you.
It's just my cheat sheet, so I don't have to flip through each
Nope,
one as
that's
we go.
fine. That way I can, when I do this, I can put
Okay. So.
right order.
Public comment? Rosemary, or I'm sorry, please identify yourself for the camera.
Rosemary Pelletier. I have 3 suggestions, recommendations, whatever, to bring to your attention and ask for your consideration. First, you have a newly appointed town agent who only acts upon your request. Normally, it would be reasonable to involve the town agent in the forensic audit report, as you did with the dismissal of Mr. Walker. However, the current town agent, Ms. Rebecca Dragon, served as a town auditor during the time period under investigation. So to avoid any conflict of interest or even the appearance of conflict of interest, I'm asking for your assurances this evening that you are not going to call upon her to render services regarding the forensic audit. I think that would be a wise thing to do. Secondly, I trust that you have seen sufficient evidence that we as citizens have not seen of the financial concerns to justify further investigation. Otherwise, you would not have authorized the forensic audit at a cost to the taxpayers of just under $50,000, is my understanding. The payroll records are a piece of this audit. As I listened to the replay of your November 14th meeting, it was clear that you're intending to change the payroll policy that is currently the current policy. It is also clear that the motivation for changing that policy is that the current practice is not in compliance with the current policy. This fact alone I find troubling. Your solution, Mr. Jarvis, is to change the policy to fit the practice. I was surprised that no one questioned that approach. In line with your fiduciary responsibility, I think it's unwise and possibly risky to make any change before you receive the complete forensic audit and have time to review it and make it public. I think the policy should not change until the following questions are answered. In what ways are the current practice or practices in non-compliance with the current policy? When did the non-compliant practices start? Who initiated the non-compliant practices and under what authority? Who has benefited financially from this non-compliant practice? Who knew or should have known about this non-compliant practice and remained silent? And how much has this non-compliant practice cost the taxpayers of Pownal? I think only after those questions have been answered should you then consider a rationale upon which to change the policy. And to say it has been done this way is not a rationale. And to say this is what the employees want is not a rationale. It concerned me that now that you don't have a town administrator to research and develop policy, you seem to abdicate that responsibility to your employees. It is one thing to get input from managers and employees and to weigh their merits, weigh the merits of their input. It is very different to have them, as Mr. Jarvis said, vet the policy. Also, Ms. Rowe asked Mr. Burrington, the road foreman, directly if there was anything else he wanted in the policy. She wanted to make sure it was all in there. He is not the one who has a legal fiduciary responsibility to the citizens of Pownal. You are the ones. And my final point is, given the nature of the pressing issues on your plate and the number of special meetings you have scheduled, I'm suggesting that you consider going back to scheduling weekly meetings instead of bi-weekly meetings, and that way citizens can better plan to attend.
Mr. Jarvis?
If it's okay, I would like to respond.
Sure.
Just since I was named there.
Right.
That was not my suggestion. My suggestion, what I said was, the auditors made a suggestion that we either need to change the policy to match the practice, or the practice needs to change to match the policy. The policy itself was enacted in 2018 with the previous board, and that was the change. That's where we changed the practice. The practice should have been changed. My suggestion to include our managers was not that they were to set the policy, it was that change management would dictate you always work with your leadership in order to make sure that when you make a change, it can be disseminated and followed, and that they're part of the process. Even if they don't get what they want, they're still part of the process, and they know why these decisions were made. So that was my suggestion. The rest of it I can't answer.
Okay.
We'll have to wait for the.
I will say, though, that you said to vet, you used the word to vet the policy with the managers.
Well, I don't know why that's wrong. You would vet that doesn't mean that they have final say. It means that we've vetted the policy and they have viewed it, they've either agreed to it or given their feedback on it. We can still overrule their feedback.
She had her hand.
Okay.
She wants to-
Can I say
So-
one other comment in response to that? In the first part of what you said about the matching the policy to the practice, et cetera, and then afterwards you said something about it doesn't make sense to change historically. You basically said, let's make the policy fit the practice, the historic practice, is what you said.
Okay, well, that's fine.
And that's the piece I'm questioning. I don't think,
But when you're asking how it's going to impact our budget and the cost, is until 2018, the policy was the current practice. We changed the practice late in the year, last year, November, and that's when the policy changed to not match the current practice. Then what we did as a board is change or we're working on changing the policy back to current practice and take that change out. So it wasn't a big change here,
Right, there wasn't.
and it
I
shouldn't
don't know what
impact the
the change-
budget.
I have no idea what the change
Marlena
is.
wants to add something. So.
Right, that what you're talking about, Rosemary, the practice of how overtime was calculated, we, the board, we did not touch that when the policy was passed in 2018. We found policies dating back to 2012 where that section in the policy was identical. So the practice you're talking about predates 2012. From 2012 to 2019, that section had not been changed at all.
okay. I had no
It
idea
just got
what
brought
the
to our
change
attention.
was.
Right.
Well,
I
it just
just
got
knew-
brought to our attention by the internal auditors that, hey, have you read the policy? You're calculating overtime wrong. This is what the policy says. And that sparked the whole discussion, and we tracked policies back to 2012, where that section of the policy was never touched. It's verbatim all the way through.
I get
Liz.
My comment to Mr. Borrington, I respect and value all of our employees, and I would like to hear what all of them have to say. So with me asking him that, that's me just being friendly, saying, is there anything else? Because I want to hear what they all have to say. I want to try to work together to
Right.
figure out the best thing. By no means did I
I
mean.
want to be sure that it's included.
I think I said, I don't know for sure, but is there anything else that you wanted? I just want to hear from him if there's anything else. So,
I would also say I totally agree that we need to go back to weekly meetings. That's very apparent.
May I just, can I get a copy of your questions? Just because
Sure.
they were so lengthy, I just couldn't keep
Yeah.
up with writing.
I didn't
Can
read
you
the whole
email
thing.
them to me?
Oh, sure.
If you would,
I'll
if that would be
email-
easier,
I'll
so I
email
can
this, yeah.
Copy me.
properly.
To the whole board.
I'll email you each a copy.
Thank you,
Thank
so we
you.
could properly
Yeah.
put them in the minutes. Thank you.
Disseminate.
And
Okay.
I thought I was going to be restricted to 3 minutes, so I didn't read my initial paragraph, but I recognize that this is an inexperienced board, and you've got a lot of things coming at you, and that there's a steep learning curve, so I just appreciate
Thank you.
what you're dealing with.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yep.
Ms. Dorr,
state your name.
Hey guys.
state your name, please.
Jenny
Thank you
Dewar.
for keeping me on track.
My name is Jenny Dewar. Karen Galise came to the last meeting and stated some history around the TA hiring committee. Mr. Bushy accused her of making false comments and demanding proof on one of the Facebook gossip groups. Everything Ms. Galeese said is fact, and I am giving you the email documentation to support it. At my second board meeting after being elected, the 4 present, Mr. Jarvis was absent, unanimously chose the hiring committee members and appointed me to get the process going right away. I did so. Ms. Galeese said that Mr. Jarvis tried to stall the process. That is absolutely true. Mr. Jarvis immediately began pushing back on moving forward. It started with an email to me stating that he was going to reschedule this meeting due to his concerns. When I informed him that we would move forward as planned, he told me it was not my decision to make and that it must be rescheduled. He also accused me of being inappropriate and that I did not respect the cooperative spirit for select board work. Amazing, as he was the sole member trying to reverse the decisions of the 4 other members. Ms. Galeese did write an email in August 2018, as she stated, expressing her dismay at the rumor mill surrounding Mr. Walker and that there was a problem with the integrity of the hiring committee. Mr. Jarvis responded paragraph by paragraph, CCing the entire board a violation of open meeting law, saying amongst other things that the committee did not call former employees or do a Google search. This is false. We did so for every serious candidate. This was all debunked in the meeting Ms. Galeese referenced, and we voted unanimously to support the town administrator. Finally, there is some confusion about a petition that was submitted some time ago. It was not actually against the gravel for Clayton Park. However, it came up again as a result of the 4-to-1 vote to allot $300 to for the requested gravel. The petition was something to the effect of demanding that anything asked for by people resulting from Empower Pownal go to a town vote. It was also accompanied by a very scary letter that in fact had nothing to do with what came out of Empower Pownal, despite the fake no dots. It was deemed not having any legal merit, and it would have cost way more than $300 to have a special election about gravel. Since proof was asked for, here it is.
Can I add something? Dawn Rodriguez, Recreation Committee. We never did get the gravel as a result of all the brouhaha.
And here's the banner.
I don't believe it was a result of the brouhaha. I
We
don't know
didn't
why
wanna
you didn't
deal
get the
with-
gravel.
The committee just didn't want to get into the mix of things. It's a group of people just doing a good
Volunteers,
cause,
It's a
volunteering,
great job.
and we just didn't want to. We didn't want to get into the mix and feel the negativity.
so the brouhaha caused you to
Yeah,
rescind
we
the
just
request.
backed
I never
away.
even knew that.
I would like to respond since
Yeah.
I'm
Maybe it's our fault for backing away, but we did.
Well, no. It's not about the gravel. I can't respond to that. But, the process. I did have some questions about how the hiring committee was put together. I quickly overcame those, and I thought the entire hiring committee agreed that we had a very positive experience. We all agreed on the same candidate. And we all agreed that it was a good. If I could do it over again, I wouldn't have any questions about it because it was. Quickly after working with the 5 members or the other 4 members of the hiring committee, it was very clear that it was a good hiring committee, and everybody brought something to the table. We all agreed that it was a good process. I didn't start any rumors, and some people came to me with people I didn't even know came to me angry about the hiring committee and some news articles that they had found. That's what I brought to the board, and that's what I brought to the executive session, because we had an executive session and Bob Fisher was coming out anyway. Why not take advantage of his time while he was there? I didn't start those rumors, and I wasn't out there talking to anybody. That's not what I do.
I did not say that Bob started rumors. That was not in my statement.
No, it
What
wasn't
were
in your
they
statement.
angry-
It was
why
in
were
the.
they angry about the hiring committee?
Let everybody-
What were they
let
angry?
everybody get it.
Well, hang on.
Okay.
Let me finish that.
Just wanted to clarify.
You didn't.
I didn't say that.
But Ms. Galeese did. She
Right, I
started
did.
her statement with, I heard from several people, and then she went into the rumors that she heard.
That's right, and I did hear from several people.
Well, that's what a rumor is. I'm sorry, what were you saying?
Why were people angry about the hiring committee? On what basis? What was that about?
I prefer not to discuss that, because even though it's public information, there were news articles about previous employment that we apparently didn't know about, but
We did.
Excuse me, we
Okay.
did know about it. I for
absolutely
one, Googled every candidate that we interviewed.
And we called
And that
them.
article that you brought to that meeting was really bound, it had no
Okay.
meat to it.
All right, hold on. So,
Well,
seeing
it's-
as this
I'm
is
not
now
doing
You just-
degrading
I
from
think
public
this is stuff
comment
we
into
can't
talking
talk
about the
about.
hiring committee and what may or may not have transpired, that's done and that's over with. I feel that has no bearing as to what's going on right now.
Okay.
So I would like to move on, please.
I would like to make a comment. So, it is my understanding that Mr. Walker
Who are
is
you?
no longer.
Oh, sorry. Please state
My
your
name
name.
is Karen Galise. It's my understanding that Mr. Walker is no longer employed by the town of Pownal. So I would like to ask you as a select board, what are your plans to hire a new town administrator? And I want to remind you that the voters approved a town administrator for this community. So I would like to know your timeline and how you are going to go about doing that, probably within the next week, at your next meeting. I realize you have to talk about it.
The procedure for what's going on is not finished yet. So we as a board cannot make any decisions on what we may or may not do going forward until the procedure is finished.
Okay, now, at the last meeting, I had many questions that you told me to send you an email. I went home that evening and typed up the emails and sent them to you, and I still do not have responses.
It's a
Nor-
legal matter, though. We can't.
Well, I
address
did
the
ask
questions.
for the audit. I don't think that's been posted on the website yet, at least it wasn't today. And I did ask, I would like to see also, and I wrote this in my letter to the newspaper yesterday, but I really would like to see the petition that Donna Lozon had in town against spending money on empowering Pownal.
I've never seen
Excuse
any.
me,
I know,
that's
and
not-
why
she had
is
nothing
this
to do with the
coming
petition.
out?
Because, I'm gonna be honest with you, what happened is
I know, but I just
2
want-
years ago when this was all happening, I had an employee come to me who lives in Pownal, very upset because somebody had asked her to sign a petition and told her that it was to stop windmills from coming into town. And I kind of consoled her and talked to her about what Empowering Pownal was all about. The fact that it was community members getting together to talk about ways that Pownal could grow and encourage development. And it wasn't about windmills because we have a zoning policy against windmills. But, I got to thinking about this petition because I really wasn't aware that there was a petition that went around. And I started connecting them together. So I'm thinking that maybe people didn't understand what that petition was for when it was presented to them. And I think a lot of people in this community probably wouldn't have understood, particularly those who don't necessarily read the newspaper every day or watch the news. So now I'm questioning, were those people was a petition worded so people clearly understood what it meant?
I don't know.
I have no idea what
I
petition.
I personally never
Petition
saw
hasn't
it.
been used.
I can speak to it. The last page of what I handed you all is the letter that accompanied the petition. The reason that the lady was mentioned, I don't need to say her name, otherwise I'm slanderous again.
This one?
Is that she came in with complaining that petition should trump us putting gravel. That's why it was connected to Clayton Park. But the petition said basically any monies that are asked for that come out of the Empower Pownal exercises has to go to a town vote and the select board cannot allow.
Well, any citizen
allocate
is,
money.
I'm sorry if I'm speaking out of turn, any citizen is free to try to start a petition.
course,
I mean,
right. And so she-
that's,
And she's
there's
not
nothing
here
the
to
select
defend
board is going
herself.
to do to
We
dissuade
already
that.
did this in a board meeting, and you can go back and watch it. And in the board meeting, it was explained that the petition was not legally binding in any way, and that was the end of it.
Okay.
But it came up again, and so I'm clarifying that it wasn't a petition against gravel.
Right.
Because, no one should be misrepresented deliberately. I know that that was just, Karen thought that, but it was a petition, but it was a petition, it came up definitely because of the gravel. And the petition, I told you what it said, and it came with that very scary letter.
So
So anyone who read that signed this petition saying, it was done by the same people who were against Empower Pownal from the start.
Okay, so Marlene
Wouldn't-
or Harry, one of you had your hand up first, I
But
don't
wouldn't
know.
the documentation from that meeting, it have gone into historical preserve? Like, wouldn't it be preserved with the board meeting minutes
is.
and documentation
They're-
from that?
They're minutes, so that's why it is.
That's open to the public
I
to
didn't know anything
come
about
in
the
and
petition until that
find them wherever
discussion
they're,
happened.
wherever they're filed.
I had
Okay.
never heard about the petition either. It was the board before
So Karen,
mine.
I'm guessing that that's what you might have to do.
Well, I'm just afraid that people were afraid there were scare tactics in this town at that time, and I know there were. I mean, you think about the dots, you know, so there was stuff going on.
Can you explain that? What do you mean the dots?
Can you explain the dot thing?
Oh,
People brought
there was this dot voting on, we came up with, I don't know, do you remember 18, 25, 137 ideas, and then we were given.
Council on Rural Development was here.
Right, and we were given dots to pick the ones that sounded interesting to us, and then there was a group that were clamoring for no dots, and I was the one who actually said, please just give them no dots, and we'll do that. Well, so the no dots canceled out the yes dots, so it was all kind of silly. But the thing is that like -4 is still bigger than -12. So we narrowed it down from those to I think maybe 5 or 7, I don't remember. And then we did another set of dots, yes and no dots. And then they said, okay, for the first time in 50 years, we have a situation where there are 30 fake no dots that all say no on them. Do we vote to accept those no dots or not? And so it was like,
Harry's got
Well,
something.
hang on,
So we-
if I could-
Hold on.
so we
I think
voted
this
not
is-
to accept the no dots.
A lot of this,
Hold on.
This is
a lot of this stuff has been covered now since we've taken over. We've adopted the town plan. There is a little spot on there if the state mandated for us to have windmills, because with state statute and all the energy stuff that's been put forward and everything else, if we didn't take and set that up, then we could have been carte blanche like over on Searsburg where they just wiped out 500 acres.
Yeah,
Okay, so we've already taken steps
exactly.
in the direction for that with our
That's right.
town plan.
Yeah,
So,
Yeah.
I mean,
but this woman was told differently. She was told,
I-
if you don't
Well,
send
what
this
one
petition.
citizen
here's
tells
the thing,
another
I
citizen
mean-
is no concern of the select board.
No.
We've already.
And-
But no,
Facts.
that's
I don't
not,
understand
that's
what
not
the
what,
problem
that's
is.
not
But
what
it's-
I'm saying. I'm saying that at the time that this petition was brought around, were people scared into signing it.
okay,
And being scared into signing a petition is illegal.
but
And
the
it's
other,
also illegal to sign a petition that doesn't tell you what you're signing.
But we're moving forward.
yes, that's where I'm
Right?
going, is that we've adopted a town plan to set things in motion in lieu of this kind of stuff. So that, I personally didn't know
And
anything
I knew that,
about
Harry, that
the,
there was that you had done that about the windmills,
Right.
and that's what I explained to her.
but I didn't know anything as far as this petition myself either.
Yeah.
That was previous to us. I know since this board has been moving, we've worked with the recreation committee and stuff like that. As far as with grants, I mean, they've sought out grants and we gave them the
You know,
okay
here's-
to take and go forward. So that's what I'm saying. You guys are working in the past. I want to work
But
in
I'm
the
gonna tell you,
future.
I'm gonna go back, I'm gonna go in the past again.
Because-
Years ago, when my kids were growing up, I was part of the recreation committee in this town. There were many of us. There were part Stephen Pusey, Nikki Josefiak. And we did as much for this town as we could. We raised money, and we always worked together as a great group. You know, our kids grew up and we moved on, and other people, unfortunately, the recreation committee fell by the wayside until the Empowering Pownal
Some
group
people,
got together.
right, make a new group to pick up the paces.
Can you clarify
We-
something for me? When I hear recreation committee, I think of the school. Is it, are
It's
you
the
talking about
recreation
something different?
Task force, it
Task
should be
force,
called.
it might be
Okay,
different.
which-
Ours
Which,
is-
you know,
Yeah.
which has
Okay.
It's two
started.
separate
Can
entities.
I
Okay.
finish?
Right.
One's the task
But we
force,
had,
one's the
but we did the school and
committee.
we did sports activities.
Okay.
You know, we did the soccer program.
Right,
and
baseball, soccer,
Softball, we had
yeah.
Steve was a softball coach, baseball.
Right.
And that was through the town,
Let
right?
Dawn answer.
Yeah, it was
Dawn has
Yeah.
something to
Yeah.
say.
Dawn,
Dawn, complete her
So-
sentence.
Just a quick
Sorry,
thing,
Dawn.
connecting
Thank you.
things. So moving forward, I'm hoping that the recreation task force will be able to come to the select board and request tiny bits of money to support ongoing activities related to trails and recreation. Even perhaps there might be a possibility of that task force being integrated into the standing recreation committee, because people on this committee had no involvement. I mean, I went to the Empower Pownal meetings, but people on the group include some who just moved to town, have no idea past history. And so please don't see us as anything other than a group supporting the town. That's what I
Ryan,
would
can I?
request.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Why would you think that we wouldn't?
That the petition that she was referring to in the past. My husband came just briefly to request the money because the group of us were trying to clear Clayton Park and we needed some areas that we thought would benefit by gravel.
Well, I knew nothing
And,
about
yeah,
the petition,
but that, I'm just
we're
connecting the
just
past with the
moving
present.
forward.
But
Right.
moving forward, I'm just hoping that the task force will be welcomed as a,
Well, I think
as a
we as
community
a select
group.
board have
Yeah.
been
Like a
more,
public
more than
private
welcoming.
partnership.
You
So
have
I
totally
don't understand why,
No, I'm just,
why
thanks,
everybody's
Brian.
so
I'm-
angry at us
I'm
about
not.
something that
I'm-
happened before we were involved. And
Brian, I didn't know that this was gonna come up tonight. I just came as a concerned citizen and just in general wanting to keep more informed than I have been recently.
yeah,
And so with their bringing that up, I just wanted to say that I wanted to make a connection with moving forward. And I'm happy that I really appreciate all that you've done to support the committee, and I just wanted to say on a positive note that, you know, we're looking forward to being welcomed here, and not as a present movement.
Always.
we as a board, I don't
You
think we've
have
done
to.
anything to dissuade.
Again, you haven't. I'm just, because we're a task force, and we're not a town group, I just am thinking in the future, I just wanna, you know, see us
You're
as.
doing things for the town
Right,
and people
Yeah,
exactly.
involved,
any
so
group that wants
we
to do
should be
anything
in-
positive for
Right.
town, the select board is open to working
Well,
with them.
it's this whole concept in the past that connected this group.
Well, we can't change what happened
No,
in
I
the
know,
past.
so that's
I mean,
why
we
I'm.
can keep bringing it up, but there's
No,
nothing
no, no.
we can change
Well,
the
so-
past.
So as we move forward
people in that
together,
here.
No, I
maybe we
understand
can
that.
figure
Just
out a way to
trying go
fully
forward.
integrate the task force with the town, if that's a problem, if anybody sees that as a problem.
Well-
We don't wanna lose the enthusiasm of people,
Right.
and because it came up, I just wanna,
So
I
you're
don't think you
suggesting
will.
that the task force become,
I don't wanna
A town
suggest
entity?
that, I'm just saying, we wanna, perhaps we should have that discussion at some time, if that would be more appropriate than, or being perceived by some as outside of the town. Let's talk about it at some point.
Okay.
We'll
That may
invite
be
you to ask you to
Okay.
come to a recreation committee meeting and think through what the best path would be to move forward. I just was trying to connect things, I didn't mean to.
no, I
Yeah,
appreciate
thanks.
all that.
Would you like us to put you on, like, maybe the next
No, I really,
meeting or
I really
something, or
feel
in the
better
future?
if we had the group's consensus. I'm really comfortable speaking for the group.
Okay.
Yeah, but thank you for the invitation, and in the future, that would be great.
No, if you want to talk to the task force and ask if
Yeah, that
they'll
would be
message
great.
us and ask to be placed on an agenda, and feel free to bring in a
That would be
proposal.
great, we will. Thanks a lot, really appreciate it.
Brian about that.
I'm sorry, Bob.
No, I just want to say, I've always advocated for, well, first of all, I very much appreciate our volunteer groups, because they do a lot of good things for the community. But one of my principled stances is that I always advocate for the separation of what is municipal, what is public, and what is private. And when I say private, I don't mean secret, I mean not part of town government versus being part of the private sector. So that's important to me, and it'll always be important to me. It's not a quality assessment of any private group, and it never has been. I would say the same thing if we were talking about Vassar or Bennington Trail Cruisers or people who love Bob Jarvis, which is pretty much
So you're
my wife and
considering
my
this,
kids.
you're considering this task force a private group?
It is a private group.
See,
It's
that's-
not part
that's
of town
what's-
But
government.
they're volunteering for the benefit of the town.
It just
Well, yeah, of
happened to
course they
start
are,
that
but
way.
it's
Right.
not that I'm
Sort of.
considering it, it's a statement of fact that it's private, it's not part of town government, so
That's
it's,
true.
it's just a statement of
I guess
fact.
it's just the words, it's
I-
how
It's
it's
the way
not
it
a,
evolved.
yeah.
And it's confusing because the same words are used.
But
for
I
the
don't want
group that
people
is
to be
connected to the
scared
town.
and think
Right.
that we're not gonna work, because that's not the case.
Thanks.
Because what happens is if you have volunteers who come forward and do things for the town and they get pushed back, they're not gonna come forward
Right.
anymore.
Right.
I
I
understand.
mean,
that.
obviously,
That is
we're,
already happening.
But again, we're moving forward
That's
and
what I
we
want
are
to.
a new group of people.
I mean, we
so-
don't have an open
Thank you.
checkbook for everything,
No,
but
you
we
don't.
are gonna
But we do have-
reasonably listen to
But the
things.
town does own a gravel bank, am I
Yeah,
correct in
yes.
saying that?
So,
and it's in
Anybody
scarce
else?
supply.
That was good. That was good. Good talk.
I'm Dave Lowe, and I'd just like to say that I assume that the Select Board and Mr. Walker and concerned citizens here and elsewhere all have the best interests of the town in mind. And based on that assumption, it just seems logical to me that getting some answers to the questions that Ms. Scalise asked in her email and then in the banner letter to the editor would move us on the road away from finger pointing and guessing and towards some clarity. So I guess the question comes back to you. Will those questions the answers to those questions be forthcoming, or there continue to be reasons that they can't be?
Anything in regards to Mr. Walker is personnel related. We are legally not allowed to talk about it. If Mr. Walker wishes to make anything public, that is up to him.
Right, okay.
That's
It's up to
I
him.
can't say that any more clearly.
But not all
So
the
people can
questions-
ask all they want. We are legally not allowed to talk about it
With regard to Mr. Walker?
with regards to Mr.
Yes,
Walker.
I understand that.
But not
With
all the
regard-
questions were in regard to
Well,
Mr.
in
Walker.
regards to the audit, I don't know if you guys heard, but I misread or was not clarified when I replied back to Mr. Graham when he requested to meet with us tonight. And I put it on the agenda as an executive session. But after Elizabeth and Bob reviewed the email, it says that he didn't think it rose to the occasion, so it's now going to be open session. So you're all welcome to stay and listen to what his preliminary report
And
is.
if
Or
we
watch
could say everything, I wish we could, just so everyone knows, and it just.
Just
So
for
you'll
clarity.
get some
And
of your
you
answers tonight if you
unanimously
guys wanna
voted,
stick
so-
around.
The audit.
And
I
you can
mean-
ask questions and he can answer whatever he's legally bound to answer, so ask away.
Is this
Take the
audit?
opportunity, yes.
The forensic audit.
Forensic auditor will be here soon.
He's bringing in preliminary
And
results.
we've
Because
opened
he's-
it up.
It's not on your notes.
It was under,
It was supposed to be legal and contractual.
legal
Legal and
contractual, but we
Right.
changed it to now move it into open, so you are more than welcome to listen and ask questions, and whatever he can legally answer, he will answer.
Beyond the audit, are there easy answers to Karen's questions about the Vermont State Fire Marshal architectural plans? Are those complicated or easy answers?
That's
I guess
coming
we
up.
can get some.
There,
Yeah,
That's-
Paul
that's
Paul
at-
Bean's here,
Paul
Paul
Bean's
Bean's
sorry.
here.
Thank
Yes,
you.
we have that.
Thank you very much.
That
Somebody's
is coming up.
with the easement.
Anything else?
I was just looking at the
No, I'm just wondering, 'cause we might have covered that earlier.
We just want to.
Good.
Okay.
And
Karen, anything else?
The letters that Brian had in response to I think it was a Pownal newsletter, you had some comments that were made in regards to that article, the Pownal newsletter that Bob posts on the internet or sends out via email.
There was
You had
That's
them at the
coming up.
last meeting?
I think we're
That's
talking
under
about that. That's under
new business.
the newsletter.
Yeah.
I don't have my bag with me, unfortunately. Well, I can run out to the truck and grab it. I
No,
walked in without
no,
it.
I'll get
Well,
it
it's
next
just the
time.
statement I think she's talking about on the web.
No, you had a
Right?
bunch of responses to that newsletter in your hand at the last meeting. I think they were stapled
I
together.
didn't see them.
I don't.
I don't remember.
Or maybe I'm wrong.
Did
I
somebody
don't
send
remember
that?
that.
Or drop it off, or?
I thought you said.
I will have to look through my bag.
Yeah,
I
next time.
honestly don't remember that.
Okay.
Maybe I did. That's,
I assume that's what you were talking about.
What emails?
That's what I'm trying to remember.
I don't.
Or
see
they
anything.
were comments that were made about regards to the newsletter.
was it something somebody provided to me?
I thought you had copied them. That's what it sounded like. I could be wrong.
Well, I was gonna say I
was
can't.
not
I
in the
can't
best of
print.
shape.
I can't print from my phone. I'm not hooked to any printer with this, so it's nothing I would have printed out.
Okay.
So,
It doesn't ring a bell.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay.
No, I'm happy to go get my bag and
No.
dig it
carry
out.
on. Carry on.
Okay. Any other public comments? Please state your name.
Jamshi. I had some people asking me, and I did ask a question. It was on the Pownal discussions page. I had asked it to Mrs. Gleese about a note that she had passed to Mrs. Pellin during the meeting that we had here. And I've had other people
You didn't ask
asking me,
me.
wanting to know what that note was, since it was handed out in public forum. We were wondering what that was.
I said to Mrs. Pellin, she is videotaping you and only you.
I was in there and my shoes were. I'm glad she's not today. I'm wearing my muck boots.
Good.
I'm glad I have such a great big fanfare. Let me know if anybody wants an autograph later, and
So,
if I die and it's worth money, give it to my children.
Unfortunately, as I've stated to board members in the past, and I'll say it again, as members of the public, we have to have thick skin. Politicians need to have thick skin because the public is free to basically say anything about us they want. It's I've had some pretty hysterical and degrading things said about me and stuff I can't really repeat on camera. as
I
I
can
think
attest
most
to
of us have. So
Moving
it's
forward.
it's unfortunate,
Yes.
but unfortunately it's a side effect of being in the public eye.
Well, I think it's a side effect of society because it's just disrespectful.
It is,
So-
but unfortunately,
And you're right.
however people feel about it, it is not. It's freedom of speech. It's
Yep,
there's a
you're
reason
right.
it's the
You're
First
absolutely
Amendment of the Constitution.
Yeah. I agree with you.
Can you, I know that, yes, it's, of course, people can say whatever they want to say, and that's, they'll carry on however they do, but,
Well, unless it's hate speech.
but yeah, that's freedom of speech, that's something we all have a right to.
Unfortunately,
Um,
hate speech needs to be protected along with everything else.
Yeah, I agree. But, and I understand that, as a public meeting, you can record, but can you as a board, I don't know the
Bless you.
answer to this, but it's something we can do. Can you as a board, say not to social media? I mean, streaming
I
to
don't.
social
I don't
media,
think so
opening
because
it up to.
Cat TV
Well, I think Cat TV's
themselves
here
stream
to social media.
Facebook stream
Right.
live.
Right?
But
You
people-
guys
we're
are
not
streaming- are you
hiding
streaming live
anything.
Facebook
No.
now? Yeah.
People
They
can't
can.
comment on it.
We have no control over what
Right.
people do over social media.
I think you may be able to control if someone's sitting here streaming onto social media during.
What
I
if
don't
somebody's?
I don't think it's a
people
big
are free
deal.
to do that. There's
it
no.
kind of
It's not
was.
illegal. And if somebody at home is commenting on it, that's beyond our control.
Okay, that's, I'm asking, I mean, I was just saying.
We may
maybe
we
look
may
into
not
seeing
we
if
may
there's
not
a-
like
if
what
you
people
can-
have to say, but we
You're not
don't.
understanding my question. I'm asking if, to maybe look into seeing if that you can make parameters of what people can do.
No,
when
I
they're
understand what you're
meetings.
saying.
Yeah,
And I
I
think that
I
you might
understand
be
what
able
you're
to.
saying, but we can look into it, but I don't think there's anything we can do, Mr. Jarvis.
Just, first of all, I think that anybody who comes in and Facebook live streams, I don't see any problem with that. But you did raise a very valid point, is that Cat TV is just a one-way stream, whereas you can comment on it. Perhaps if somebody does come in and does Facebook live stream, we can't have an impact on what people say on social media, but we can always start it with a discussion saying we would ask that anybody commenting on the live stream, please keep it respectful, please keep it on topic, please no personal attacks, that sort of thing. That would be a lot nicer if it was a lot more civil. If the commentary was a lot more civil. But as far as I'm concerned, somebody coming in here and Facebook live streaming or recording or doing whatever else is doing the public a service by disseminating a public meeting.
I think the
I would
social
think
media
that
whole aspect of it could be used in such a positive way. I mean, we could interact with the public. I mean, there's always going to be
I mean,
there's always going to be bad with
as
everything
much as
that
I
we do.
disagree with what was
So,
said in that video, I think that video got more views
Yeah,
than
I mean,
Cat
we have
TV.
nothing
Sure,
to
they were
hide,
having a
so
drinking game
yeah.
on it. Of course it had more views.
You know, I
Well,
call
Statute,
the Secretary of
statute,
State and you
statute,
cannot,
statute.
anybody can screen. You're right.
All right,
Yeah,
so that's the
right.
answer. That's
Yeah.
That's the
there's
answer,
answer.
basically, that's it.
I asked the question.
But
that's
it's
all.
still disrespectful.
I'd like to comment on that too.
Okay.
There's also a real attempt to take and smear everybody who viewed it, who commented on it, with the worst possible comment, and that's just guilt by association. People are only responsible for the comments they make. They're not responsible for somebody else's comment, and that we shouldn't be talking down about the people that watched it or commented on it or those sorts of things as well, except for the individuals, the exact comments, and whoever made such bad comments. And for us, the select board shouldn't be saying anything about it because we're the select board. We don't comment on what happens in the private sector.
all I can say is
That's all.
what I offered as advice. Ignore what they have to say. If somebody's being negative about
look
you,
at it.
just turn the
have
other
to
cheek
ignore
and walk
it.
away.
I agree.
Yes, Marlena?
Move forward.
I'd like to say something. You know, it is a shame when there has to be so much negativity, especially personal characteristic attacks on individuals via social media, because in most cases, those are the things that lead to children in our school systems committing suicide and heinous crimes happening and mass casualties and shootings and all that stuff. Not saying that's going to happen with adults, but when you have adults doing it who have teenage children that then have to tell their children don't do it, or they have to sign the contracts with the high schools that there'll be no social media bullying, and when kids in the high school, and correct me if I'm wrong, Elizabeth, because you work there, if kids in the high school get caught saying something negative or making a personal characteristic attack about a student, they get in-school suspension for it, and they probably get scolded by their parents, and they probably have their social media sites cut off and all that other stuff. But then isn't it hypocritical when the parents do the exact same thing? So you have to think about where's the fine line between it's not okay for students to bully people, but it's okay for the parents to behave in the same way. So just,
It's never okay for anybody to bully anybody.
Society in general, we really need to take a hard look at that. And then when you're doing it against another individual who then is the victim, and those making the attacks and saying all the negative stuff are the victimizers, and they continue to do it over and over again, you're just continually re-victimizing the person that the social media attack was against. And that's just, it's unfortunately, it's something that's happening in society, and it's happening all over the country, but it's just very inappropriate. And when you have any member of any public body who even makes a poor judgment to, I guess, comment on it, then yeah, I think as a society we have the right to question that person's integrity if they're going to that. They can't control what other people are saying, but is it a wise choice to even comment on something that's so heinous?
Well, hang on.
Well,
Now
in
you're
some-
saying
but
that you
in
have
some
to be
states-
responsible,
in
and you have to
some
go back and
states-
read every comment before you comment on
Well,
the stream. You
Bob-
can't hold people
Bob,
responsible
in
for
some
that.
states, if a child is caught bullying another child online, the child who is being bullied can file charges and bring
Right.
that kid into court.
But that wasn't what she was talking about. She
No,
was
but
talking
she's
about
talking
the bad
about-
judgment of somebody going
Well,
in and
but
commenting
she's
on
also
this,
talking
even
about
with
parents.
a respectful comment, because somebody else made an unrespectful comment.
She's talking about adults
That's too much.
who are exhibiting disrespectful behavior, yet telling their children or parenting their children.
That was part of what she
Can I go
said.
back?
Right. Don't tell
That
me
was
what I
part
said.
of what she
Don't
said.
tell me.
Bob,
Don't
did you
correct me.
say earlier, I think I understood you to say that maybe when you see somebody is live streaming at your meeting, you could make
The
the
comment at the
request that people, or Brian would be the one to make, or Mr. Harris, to make the
Don't be so formal. My name's Brian.
request that people be respectful in their comments.
Mhm.
I mean, at least,
Right.
and at least that's a step in the right direction.
We're-
It's
we're
kind of
attempting.
like when you go to a concert, they ask you to turn your phone off. I mean,
Well, they do that for copyright reasons. I'm not sure that y'all are protected by copyright.
That's correct, we're not. That's right.
but,
Law, we
but,
can't be.
no, I mean, I think that
No,
should be
I-
a routine part of your,
All right, so
of
is
your
there,
procedure.
Yeah, if we just incorporate that, if
I
anybody's
hate to
gonna
cut
fight,
this
we
off,
might.
but it's
I
already
think we need to go.
almost 8 o'clock and we're still in public comment. Is there
yeah.
any other public comments?
I'm gonna have to leave because I have guests. But another thing to consider, given the size of tonight's meeting, the planning commission has started meeting at the firehouse.
Mhm.
And I think maybe the select board might want to consider a different venue.
In the town hall?
We looked into
Just
that
keep getting
before
bigger
and
and
we can't,
bigger.
we can't leave with warrants.
We can't.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay, gotcha.
That's what we were informed.
Bennington meets at the firehouse.
Yes.
And they don't bring their warrants.
No.
They just don't bring their warrants to the select board meeting. You can
Just to
come
let
sign warrants.
everybody
not
know, in
to
case you
the
don't know, we got a new town hall on the way.
Yeah. But you don't have to have warrants at the select board meeting. You also don't have to have mail. Most other select boards don't have an itemized mail.
Yeah, it's
But-
kind of, that's select board's choice,
Yeah,
what,
I
one
know.
way or the other.
I know.
Okay.
But
Okay.
you could
So-
certainly meet at a bigger space.
We'll move on to
Well,
old
hopefully
business.
by next year
business?
we will have a bigger space. Any other public comments before we move on?
Let's get Pauline
All
up
right,
here.
moving on to personnel policy was the first thing on,
I'd like to make a motion to just table that.
Yeah.
okay.
Let's do
I'll
that.
second
Until
that.
after we hear from the forensic auditor, and then
Yeah.
we'll just,
Yep.
All right, so we have a motion and a
second
second to
that.
table the personnel policy.
Yeah.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Okay, town hall updates. Pauline, if you would be ever so kind as to join us.
I'm sorry, I have to go.
I'm sorry,
Hi.
thank you very
Bye.
much,
Have a good night.
everyone.
Be careful out there.
Good night. Bye, Sharon.
Thank you.
So please introduce yourself for the viewers at home that may not know you.
Pauline Guntlow, and I'm the project manager for the town hall. And here are some for the select board, just so you have an idea of what I'm going to talk about. You kind of already know.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. First of all, we had our first go-round of the bids. And because of the time of year and so forth, before we opened the bids, I went and looked at a long-range weather forecast, and it wasn't good. During December, it was projected that we only have 4 days above 40 degrees. And you can't really pour a foundation unless you have at least 5 days, but besides that, it does make it more expensive. So, in fact, we also, the fact was we only got 2 bids, and that was because, I believe, of the time of the year. One of those bids was for the moving the structure, and so we in fact accepted that bid. And but
Can you explain? Can you tell us who's on the board to, who's on the committee to approve the bids? Oh, the select board and yourself.
Yeah, the select.
Okay.
Yes.
And Mr. Percy is the select board representative that works closest with
Okay.
Pauline for questions and whatnot.
Okay, good. I just wanted to
okay,
clarify that in my mind.
all right.
Thank you, Pauline.
Oh, I don't get to go spend all the money
I know.
myself. So anyway, yeah. So at that point, Linda was at the meeting. Our assistant town administrator, and myself. Michael Gardner, who also is our building inspector, came later, and hopefully Harry can be there at some time. Okay, so we opened the bid and made the decision at that point that given the projection of the long-term weather forecast, we might as well wait 4 months, delay the project by 4 months, and until early April. So that's what we did. And because we did that, we also put out, rebid 2 of the issues that we need to deal with mostly, which are excavation and foundation. And so those bids will be open on, excuse me, December 18th. So that's where we are with that.
Can I ask you another question? How about the fire suppressant unit?
I'm going to get to that.
Okay, I'll be quiet.
I have a question. My name is Leo Haggerty, just so everybody knows. My question is, I noticed that bids, I know that you had it open for bids. I personally went to get bid specs to check, and one of the things that I noticed, I was told, of course, that there was a thing hanging on the wall out there, that had something to do with it. And for the excavating part, there was no engineer's breakdown of layering and gravel compaction and all of that I saw anywheres. And so my question is how can you actually get people to do that? I mean, I know several contractors who do excavating, and they were like, well, how can we bid on it if we don't have that information? Because that all entails into the price.
Right, well, that information is there, and the site plan is here, and there's plenty of information about the bid, how to bid on the excavation.
There was nothing hanging, there's still, I believe at this time, there's nothing hanging in the front that says.
It's not hanging, it's printed somewhere.
It was available,
Yeah,
if they wanted to come in and check it
I've
out.
been here for 2 weeks,
Okay.
just about every day, and I've requested it and haven't.
I
Okay,
didn't
so
know you-
we'll-
I
thank you
didn't
for
know
bringing
you
that to our
requested
attention.
it.
We'll have
So,
to look
yep.
into that and make sure that whoever has
Yep.
it.
right, okay.
So
But, yeah,
between
my-
Harry
Yeah.
and Pauline, please make sure that information is
Okay.
available.
Dig it
Yeah.
up.
Okay, then, preferred builders, because they're a modular company, are required to have their plans evaluated by a third-party inspector and a Vermont engineering company architect. And we received that the official stamps this past week. And so, we also have already gotten the building permit from the town. So now, the next step is to get the building permit from the Vermont Department of Public Safety. And so that application is, consists of 4 pages of basic information. And it requests a document explaining the significance of our historical schoolhouse. We have that. A site plan, both hard and electronic copies of preferred builders, 150-page plan, and a permit fee. The fee is based on $750,000 cost of the project. The cost is $800 per 1,000, bringing Pownal's total cost to $6,000. The application to the Department of Public Safety will not be accepted unless the check is also included and is payable to them. So for that reason, I'm requesting a check for the $6,000 so I can send the application to the Department of Public Safety.
Because that's for the state architectural stamp of approval between public safety and the state approved architects.
Right.
And
So,
you need this. You need the check to come to you. You don't want it mailed to
no,
them.
it goes to the,
No, it's a she's listed who to pay it to.
Right.
It needs to go to the Department of Public Safety.
right, go,
I
right
say
here.
go to them.
Do you
The
want to
application.
submit it with the application
I
and
do.
the whole
Yes.
packet? Okay.
The
Right.
whole packet.
So we need to get it to you.
So motion to approve to give Pauline a check in the amount of $6,000 payable to the Department of Public Safety
Yep, and money's coming out
For
of the
the
town.
application.
For the
for the
application.
application.
And it's coming out of the town hall fund,
Yep, the municipal office fund.
municipal office fund.
I'll second that.
Alright, we have a motion and a second to approve issuing a check in the amount of $6,000 to the Department of Public Safety for the application, to be given to Pauline Gutlow to submit with the application. So is there any discussion?
The only discussion I would have, that I wanna make a point of is the fact that we have the stamp plans. That's a big deal and it deserves
Oh, it is
applause.
a
which-
big
It does.
Yeah, that is a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there were, it's, the general layout is, or the layout is exactly what we submitted. There weren't any major changes or anything like that. There was a little going back and forth because the modular company had to change different fasteners and things like that, but it was nothing major at all. So we're in good shape.
Oh, I do have another comment, sorry, since we're in discussion. So, the other comment was on the, I know there was a question about the fire suppression system. I just want to assure the voters and everybody that the fire suppression system was included in the $600,000 bond that the voters
Yes.
approved.
Yes.
That was included.
Well, I know
There
the
is
fire
still a
commissioner
possibility.
wouldn't let you not have that.
Well, there's still a
Right.
possibility that we can get a variance, but I
Right.
don't know if it's true or not.
Right.
If we do get the variance, then we save some money, but what was approved includes the fire suppression system.
Correct.
Correct.
Pauline, question, may I ask?
Yeah, sure.
By delaying the start date, are we impacting anything? Like, is the project considered started?
That's a good question.
Do we need
A
to
lot
come
of-
down here next week when it's warmer and like shovel a hole?
A lot of people say, I mean, we already have our plans, we're getting them approved and all that. The lay of the weather, a lot of people consider that, starting, but
Is there?
I don't know.
Can you and Harry work something out where you guys get something in writing stating that our plan is started as of 2019?
Well, what we're waiting
Well-
for is the public safety stamp
Yeah.
of approval.
Yeah.
And they will give us the directive from there. And that's what we've got
So
to.
that's probably
So
when
the
it
sooner we
starts.
get this to them, the
Correct.
sooner we
The
get the
process.
answer.
And
Right.
But if I
Can you sign
understood
that so
the,
you can leave it?
if I could
we
chime in,
didn't-
just if I understood
we
the
didn't
email
vote yet.
correctly, the difference in the difference in the code is not all that substantial. It doesn't impact us
isn't.
as much as we
It
thought
is
it
not.
did.
Right. Not on
It
the
does
municipal
impact,
building.
but not to the extent that we thought. I don't, at least that's what my understanding. I don't have the details on it, so we'd have to actually look at it.
Yeah, well,
Harry does.
obviously, the people that have just stamped this know that it's not going to be
And they stamped
started
it,
in the
so
middle of
that's
winter, so.
Alright, so if there's no further discussion, oh, sorry.
Has the loan been approved already? Have you,
I'm still working with the bond.
Right.
Is that part of the updates from you on when that might come approved?
We got to talk to the treasurer for that part.
Yep.
could you make that
she's
known
coming
to the people in town that it's gonna be delayed because of the weather, in your newsletter? So that
Well, it's gonna be in
Yeah.
it'll be in the newsletter and it'll be in
It's gonna be
the,
in the minutes.
and it'll be on the
Minutes.
website under
Right.
town hall updates.
Yeah, we still have the town hall update web link.
Yeah.
There's still the town hall update web link on the
Yeah.
webpage, so that's
Yes.
where a lot of the information is placed, so
Okay.
that we're keeping everybody abreast.
We need to finish calling a question before we go to public comment.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, discussion kind of denigrated into that.
That's one thing
All
about
right.
this room that makes it like this.
It is.
I'm
All right,
sorry,
so
but-
if there's no other discussion,
It's,
we have a motion and a second. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. So,
And so-
sorry, I'm trying to keep.
I think we can leave that for Helen for tomorrow.
What was your question?
I said I think we can leave this for Ellen tomorrow, having Brian sign Pauline's sheet requesting this.
Yeah.
So health officer?
Okay.
I believe we're up to Leo.
Leo.
here.
We're up to me,
Once-
okay.
Once Brian
Congratulations,
finishes
Leo.
writing.
so I'm right, I signed it and I wrote, please process ASAP.
Okay.
Just in case anybody's wondering what I was writing.
Thank you, Pauline.
Thank you very much.
So, you set that over there. Okay, so, moving on to, new business, health officer. Mr. Haggard,
How you
please
doing?
introduce yourself again.
I'm Leo Haggerty. I am the newly appointed town health officer. The reason why I was asked to put on the agenda is I have a few questions. One of which is I need approval to have an account set up with the sheriff's department for service. Because the state clearly states that when you're doing service, it has to be served in a civil manner. So any type of health orders that I issue have to be served by sheriff.
Okay.
Marlene?
I was just, I brought you some information. I was just up at the state yesterday, and I attended the ordinance training.
Okay?
Yeah, and I just wanted to give you all of this. But one thing I wanted to mention is that they mentioned up there that there was been a change to the law, now allowing health officers to issue citations, issue tickets. Is that why you have to set up your account with the sheriff's office
Well,
for them to issue the tickets?
It's the part of the deal is as a health officer, you're kind of like essentially kind of like a police officer. You take an oath to
You're an
uphold the
enforcement
law.
agent.
You're an enforcement agent, and we have the powers to petition the judge for warrants, the whole 9 yards.
Subpoenas and all that.
Subpoenas, yes, and so that kind of falls under that. So you have to do the civil service in order to be in line with the legalities of it.
Okay, so to what Leo is saying, he does need to get that, he does need that number, because that's how his ticket book will be issued through his membership number or whatever they call it.
Now, does the
Well-
health officer need a separate account, or do we need?
Account with the sheriff.
I don't know how that's set up already on our.
That was I didn't know either.
I mean, if some-
I checked with Julie and Linda, and they said basically to bring it before you and find out, because they weren't sure either whether we had an account with the sheriff's department to do civil service.
Well, we haven't.
I'm assuming
We
we
have
do.
an
We've
account,
had them
yeah.
serve stuff
Right.
Just didn't know if it's.
for other issues, so I'm assuming we have an account with them.
Because they have.
I would say just
separate-
reach out to Chad and,
Yeah, well, I wanted to get approval before. I don't want to be stepping outside my bounds,
We appreciate.
and I'd rather have
Thank you
approval
for
from
well, I
the
was gonna
select
say,
board
I'll make a
first.
motion to authorize Leo to reach out to Chad Duval to coordinate,
Chad Schmidt.
Chad,
Chad Schmidt.
sorry. Wrong Chad. It's been a long day,
I understand.
so I apologize. All right, so I'll make a motion to have authorize Leo Haggerty to reach out to the sheriff's department to coordinate setting up whatever he needs to.
Is there something pressing right now that you need?
Well, I have a couple issues right now that are really pressing, and I'm on the timeline with them. So
We should just have them mimic whatever they did for Mr. Walker when he was.
Well, that's why I made the motion to just authorize
Okay.
Leo to be able
Yeah.
to reach out to them and do whatever coordinating he
Leo,
needs.
on the page where it says, page 43 in little print, page
Okay.
5 in big print, at the bottom, it's the Vermont Judicial Bureau. That's where you need to call, and they'll get you set up in their
Okay.
system with whatever ID number you're going to be issued as the enforcement person. But that's where you're gonna get that, and that's where they'll issue your ticket book and your envelopes and all that stuff.
I will do that. The other was, I need the select board's, schedule. Amongst you, whoever the acting health, board is.
Yeah.
So that I may, schedule hearings.
Well, we as the entire select board are the health board, but we have to have a duly warned meeting as such as the health board. So we can't just kind of jump into it in the middle of a select board.
Exactly.
Right.
And so therefore I was kind of hoping that maybe he'd give me
So if he sent us
maybe
an email,
a set time, like
Are
one
you
day or
do you
2
want
days.
do you want a set meeting schedule, or you just want
Yeah, if I could, because that way it makes it easier when I start handing out citations.
How often do you want to? How often are you looking to come before the health board?
Probably
Once a month, twice a month?
once every 2 weeks. And that way I can give the health board an update on cases that are open and going.
Can I ask just a question about that? Because I noticed that the health board hasn't met in a long time on the website. Is it always the select board who are on the health board, or are you all doing it because nobody stepped up to be on the health board?
I think the way state statute is just it's
select-
the way it
it's the
defaults.
select
It's always the select board members? Okay.
It's the same with the
It's-
sewer commission, right? We're the sewer commission too, once a month.
Yeah, the statute
Oh,
actually says that it can be just a couple people in the select board, or it can be the whole select board.
Okay.
But it has to, and it also has to
I'm
be
happy
the
you brought
chair.
that up, yeah.
The chair of the select board has to be on that board.
Okay.
So,
so meet by week.
that's sorry.
Okay.
Pile it on. I don't care.
Well, let's
I'll
But
take
it
it.
has, so it has to be a separate
Select board.
meeting,
Right.
so, but it could be on the same day as a select
We
board.
could have
Could
it,
be
yeah.
like from 6 to 7.
It
Yeah.
can, because in a lot of the material it actually references the select board. So, and and I don't.
They're
but
supposed to
I-
work hand in hand,
Exactly.
So why don't,
but still be separate.
Yes.
But be the
And
same
so,
people.
with
But
it
work
being
together,
warned,
but separate.
here's my other thing is
It's the government.
that I also need to know from the not to get off the subject here, is I was addressed by the zoning administrator about some complaints that he had. And I needed to know, other than state statute, where the town of Pownal stands on a supposed junk ordinance, if there was one ever enacted.
It was
There is.
never enacted.
No, there is one.
Well, I thought he was
There-
referencing the one we started.
We haven't enacted a new
No, we
one,
didn't
but there
enact
is
one.
one
There
in
is
place.
one.
And
you just need to come in
It's
and
within
pull
it's
it,
within the
get-
zoning bylaws. I
Right.
thought.
Yeah, I didn't think we had an ordinance. I thought
Yeah,
we
we
just
don't have a
had
separate
bylaws.
ordinance. It's
It's
just
within-
We
stuff
have
within the
bylaws that
bylaws.
cover it, but we don't have, my understanding, I may be wrong, is that we don't have an ordinance, we
separate.
have bylaws.
correct.
It,
Yeah,
it
that's
depends
my-
on how it
that's-
was written. If it was written as an ordinance and if it meets the criteria outlined in the packet I gave you, then it's a legally
Because
binding
the
ordinance.
state actually has a, per se, junk ordinance
Yes.
for the state. And that's why I was asking, and I happened to, while I was searching through files, happened to come across a proposed ordinance that was ordinance 8222 or something of that sort.
From the town?
From the town, and I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't an active in,
I don't know.
I
So,
don't, I believe
okay.
whatever's in the zoning material is what's currently
Okay.
active.
Okay.
Anything?
But then in regards to that, with the zoning, any
that's under
properties that
bylaws
have
right now.
any zoning variances, it doesn't apply to.
Right,
I don't
but-
want to
but you
call out
have
any
to-
properties, but there are specific properties in town that.
Right, but that you didn't then need to compare whatever the bylaw
Well, that
says
would actually
to
turn
any
over
variances
to-
and permits.
Well, that would actually turn over to the zoning administrator for enforcement
Right.
unless it had something to do with health issues.
Right,
Correct.
town of health,
So-
correct.
So I mean, I guess basically, if there's no variances on record and if there's no permits on record, then whatever the bylaw is or the ordinance is what needs to be followed.
Okay.
And once we get through
Clear as
everything we're
mud.
mired in right now, eventually we will try to readdress that. issue.
Oh, and can I get a alarm code and computer access, please?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
I would,
All right. Are
you
you
sure
gonna reach
you
out to
want
Chuck to?
one?
Marlena? All right.
and I'll have to call the other guy for
The alarm guy?
code. Yeah.
Okay, so Jamie, you're gonna do that.
Yep.
And I'll email Chuck. What kind of computer access do you need?
I
To the health officer stuff?
yes, and I believe I need access to check dog license information. So I
That
don't
you
know
go
what
through
That's
that-
Julie.
through Nemrick or Julie or whatever her
it's
system
Yeah.
is. You're gonna have to find out from Julie what system that is.
'Cause she
Okay.
sells those.
Okay, and then you can reach out to, I'll email you, but you can reach out to Chuck Watson directly and let him know what it is that you need access to. That way
I
it doesn't
believe
delay
he-
coming through the
Well,
board.
I believe everything has to be approved by you,
Oh,
by the select board.
okay.
Okay.
You do have a town
And I-
email now.
Huh?
You do have a town email, correct?
No, I do not.
You didn't get that yet? Okay. Well, that's where we need to take and go then.
So I think
Do you have a
Marlena's gonna
town phone
spearhead
number?
that.
No, I don't. I don't have nothing town. Actually,
Okay.
everybody has my own personal cell phone.
Okay,
so-
I'll find out from Chuck if we can get you an extension number, so at least calls are coming into one place.
Actually, I believe on the website, Brian is still listed, and if there's on the phone, it might even
So while
still
you're
be
at it, might
Brian.
as well reach out to Jen Holly to have that removed.
Great website. Okay, anything else?
No,
I'm sorry, the bearer of good news.
No,
no,
that's-
it's- I mean,
But no,
I
that's it. That's
I
all
charge
have.
$120
Thank
an hour. Okay, we'll
Try
get
to keep it as fast and brief
Do
as
we
I can.
want
Thank
to
you.
see about having the health officer have a designated town phone, a
That's
cell
what
phone?
I just said. Actually, that would be a good idea.
Because technically he's on,
because-
he should be available 24/7.
And he
Yeah.
doesn't have an office.
Well, we have
it's
a.
right there.
He doesn't have an office.
No, that's
Oh, just
Yeah, here's his office.
His personal space bubble is his office right now.
I'm sorry to
There's a
say
file
this, but I
cabinet
have
over
been
there.
using Michael Walker's space.
Okay. We can take care of that.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
All
thank
right,
you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Okay.
All right. So is there anything else? Newsletter.
Yes, I asked to have the newsletter added to the agenda, because I just want clarification for the community. When the select board statement was made in the November newsletter, we as a select board never ever met to compile that statement. That statement was written and then it was sent to the town attorney for vetting, and then it was posted. And so I just want to make sure that as a select board, we need to make sure that we are discussing statements that are going to be coming from the select board to the public. And I feel that we should not be shutting down a committee of five's voices. And so just be mindful of that going forward, that if something's going to be stated that it's coming from the select board, we as a select board should be discussing it, agreeing on it, and putting it forth as a united team. Okay? The other thing I wanted to mention was that, Mr. Harris, you made a statement that went to the banner, and it went on our website. Can you clarify whether that was a statement from you or a statement on behalf of the board?
You talked the one you just referenced.
No. The one I just referenced was the select board statement that was published in the November newsletter that we as a select board never
Yeah.
discussed.
What was the other statement?
The other one was something that came out a week ago that you published.
Hold on.
It was on your,
offer some clarity.
it was from you, it was in the banner, it was posted on our website, and it was, it came from you. It came from Brian
Your
Harris,
application,
chairman.
you emailed me to
It was
forward
a
it to
message from the
banner.
chair.
Yeah, that
Right.
I thought that's the one she was just talking about
Yeah.
before.
No.
The
I
November
only did the
one
one.
was
Right.
the newsletter. It's two
Well-
separate.
Well, there's two things. One was a newsletter. The second thing,
It's now through.
I believe, if I
Bob wrote one,
remember
you wrote.
correctly,
I thought it was this, I have half of it, I don't have the.
we, as a board, asked Brian to reach out to the attorney so we could draft a statement, just for legal clarification, because we had so much public comment. That I know I got quite a few private emails to my thing, I think everybody else did too. And I believe that's where it was generated for your response. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So I can offer some clarity on
again,
where they
just
came from.
clarifying, yeah.
I can offer some clarity on where everything came from. So in November, there were 2 public statements. One was written entirely by, if I understand it correctly, I believe it was written entirely by our town attorney, and that was referencing the forensic audit. I was asked to draft
okay,
a
now I
public
know what one you're
statement,
talking about.
bringing
Yeah, that
the
was-
town up to speed with what we're doing with the town administrator situation. Actually, that's not true. It was bringing the town up to speed with why are we having so many executive sessions and what's going on. So that statement I wrote at Brian's request, and that was vetted by our attorney. On both that.
And you send them.
And I
emails
sent it to
us.
the entire board more than 24 hours before I launched the newsletter. So and I specifically called out in the email, please be sure to read those two statements and give me your feedback. I intend to launch Monday evening. So that's been our process, is you distribute it. Now, to your point, those were probably more contentious statements or more controversial statements than previous statements, or more impactful anyway. I think impactful is probably the right word. Because we had some things going on.
For me, as far as
people
the
wanted,
statements go, I was acting under the authority granted to me by this board to handle day-to-day operations. And when Mr. Walker was still doing this, we had no issue with Mr. Walker making statements to the banner without board approval. So I was that's what I was operating under. And knowing that we were not going to have a meeting from before I went on vacation till now, I wanted to get a statement out there to try to
And everything that you
alleviate some of the
stated, we
fears.
discussed, so
Right,
it was.
So,
Yeah,
but
feel like
I
we're
am more than
blindsided.
I don't
happy
feel
if the board
blindsided
wishes, take the authority away from me. That is the board's decision. So be it.
So I'd like to make a motion that going forward, when there's going to be a statement on behalf of the board by the board, that we as a board discuss it at our second monthly meeting, because then that will give Bob enough time to compile what we agree on. It's usually a week and a half sometimes before the newsletter even needs to come out, and then that way we're all in agreement, we all know what's gonna be in it, and it's not something that's being sent to us at 9:48 p.m. on a Sunday evening, when some of us are still traveling from being away on the weekends, because we have kids in travel soccer, so that it gives everybody time to digest it, give our input, and make sure that we're all on the same page.
I disagree
And
because I think it's just more time to drag feet and just.
If I can,
Well, I just want to
out
clarify
everything.
that as far as the time goes, that wasn't me trying to hiding stuff. That's because I was leaving Monday morning to go to Florida,
Right.
and I had sent an email to the board notifying everybody that I was going to be unavailable.
Right.
That's why I did that.
I also want to point out that it's not the time that you send it, it's the time between when you send it for comment and when it
No
actually,
Harleys in the meeting, please.
between when you send it and between when it's launched. Everybody had all day, because I sent it late on I believe it was a Sunday night,
Yes.
doesn't mean you didn't have all day Monday to read it. You did. I didn't launch the newsletter until 10:55 p.m. on Monday. And I
And
travel,
it's what
I do
we've
an
been
awful
doing
lot of
all
travel.
along.
I read this stuff
Nothing
on my
changed.
on my smartphone if I have to.
I'm fine with waiting and not doing any statements until the second meeting of every month, and no official statements from the board until then.
So is that a
That means
second?
I'll second it. That means there'll be no comments to the paper, no comments on the website.
I know. Do
Nothing.
you really? This is slowing
I think it's
everything
going to
down.
slow everything down. I don't
It's
think it's
just-
necessary.
Spinning and going nowhere.
If I may.
Sure, why not?
I did find that statement to be contentious, and people have used it and taken it to be that this was all aimed at Mr. Walker, and so the wording of it was really unfortunate. And yes, you do newsletters every month without sitting down and talking about it. This was a statement from the select board. That's what it said. It didn't say.
That went out to all
But
of us,
that
and
is
we
never-
got to say if
never
we wanted
has-
it published or not.
And then, but if not all 5 of you answer, then that shouldn't go out.
The select
A statement
board-
from the select board is not what the newsletter.
And I
The
thought the newsletter
select
was
board-
informational,
hang on,
not.
the select board-
It was informational, it was not something that you were going to put critical information.
Yeah.
The
And I would
select
would
board-
think that those comments would open you.
Well, everybody's asking, so do you want to hear it,
Well,
or do you
then you
not
put
wanna
it in the
hear
new,
it?
then you
You
write a
know?
letter to the
I-
newspaper like Brian did. You know, that's what you do.
Well, I
in
thought
those
it was
cases.
illegal to say anything.
I gotta go.
We said what we could legally.
Yes, but that
That's why we
statement,
had-
read it
hang on.
again. It was contentious, and it was finger pointing, and it was really embarrassing.
I just think the
And
The
that's
newsletter has a
select
different
board
purpose.
voted, the select board agreed that we would put out a statement, and we asked Brian to reach out to the attorney with it. Brian asked me to write the statement. The attorney vetted the statement before we put it out there.
That's
So
fine.
that's how it happened.
That's fine, but it should go in the newspaper. It shouldn't be in a informational newsletter that's for the town of Pownell.
And every
That's
member
what I
should sign
assume.
off on it.
That's
And
what I
two board
assume that
members
newsletter was.
collaborating on a statement from the entire board isn't giving the entire board an opportunity to
That's right.
give their input. As a board, I believe that if we were allowed to give our input, we would have ensured that the statement on behalf of the board encompassed all complaints, all areas of community members coming to the board and identifying situations where wasn't just a one-sided hostile environment created by Mr. Walker, but there was many other elements.
That's not what the statement
But
said.
the statement did state that there was a degree of workplace hostility, and it read as though it was one-sided, and it didn't take into consideration community members' letters of complaints, phone calls of complaint, and verbal face-to-face communications with us as a board of complaint about how they had been treated by staff members. It did not encompass that. It was one-sided. And as a board, I would hope that we would have wanted a
It's
whole
not-
picture, not a partial picture.
If we're
I just
giving-
wanna go
And that's
back.
my rationale
I wanna go
for
back 20
making
years
this
ago, when you
request.
used to call somebody on the phone and say, I'm gonna drop a letter off that I wanna put in the newspaper, will you look it over and if you agree? You know, let's go back to those days and not send, and I realize we're all busy, not send emails at 9 o'clock at night.
Well,
Hoping
hang on,
somebody will look at their
the timing
emails.
of when I sent it is not important. It's the length of time between when the email went out and the newsletter was launched. So people
But
had
she's-
all day
And
during a
people were
work day.
begging to get some kind of information,
Then
and
put it like Brian did in the
Well,
newspaper.
But did
well,
you
the
sign off
next
on
thing
it?
we're gonna be talking about
Did you
is
say
putting
yes
that.
to the statement? I sign it, Elizabeth? Did you sign off on it, Harry?
No, I didn't.
Go
Did you
for it.
sign off on it, Marlena?
Is there any way I can?
No.
Did
Are we
you
voting
sign
on
off- Brian, sorry, Brian, did you sign off on that statement? So, that's not,
I'm
getting
sorry.
it in
Karen
an
was talking to me.
email, getting it
Sorry,
in
I'll
an
leave it.
email
Okay.
is not signing off on
I
it.
didn't have
Well,
a
I-
problem with it.
Did you
had-
sign off on it?
No,
Did
but
you, then you
that's
didn't,
what
but it's
we've
not a
been
statement
doing.
from the board.
I know, but it's
You've never
just
written a
so-
statement from the board, ever, in a newsletter, never.
I'm going to make a motion.
I already.
Well, we have an active
Oh, I'm
motion
sorry,
in
we
a
have,
second
oh, yeah.
to only issue statements on the second meeting of the
Well,
month.
We have a
or
second?
whatever, that we have to discuss it as a board first, and then we have to, discuss it as a board first. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
Let's make a motion that we discuss these things as a board, and we come to an agreement as to what it's going to say.
Did you wanna, come to
No, I was
amend
just gonna
that?
say,
or-
I don't know if we got a second on that, but,
I seconded
Brian
it.
seconded
okay.
it.
I would say that, why don't we just agree to do that? Does that really require a motion? Because now, how are you gonna enforce that? And what do you do if we're,
Well,
we
it's
are
simple,
running late?
I won't be
Or what if
making
it's
any
an
more
emergency?
statements
Well, what if
as
there's a
part of
statement that
day-to-day
has to go out?
operations. That's how I'll do it.
stalling.
It's simple as that. I wasn't doing it to be nefarious. I wasn't doing it
I
to
know,
be slanderous.
Brian.
I was trying to address people's concerns. I did not take it that it was one-sided. It was not meant to be.
Brian's
I
statement
did
wasn't
not-
one-sided.
Not yours.
I didn't say,
Not talking about yours.
didn't say that,
Okay, well, that's where
no.
I
I was talking about the very first statement from the board, a statement from the board that was issued in the November newsletter.
No, okay. I'll have to
And
go
not the
back and
friends
reread it.
she's talking about, they bring the town up to speed with what we're doing in executive session.
So,
So
I have to
I was
reread it
trying to be
myself.
more open.
Yes,
So
I just wanted you to clarify where that
I was trying
was
to act
coming
within
from. I
the
had no
authority
idea.
that I thought was granted
And
to
you
me
did,
and
Brian.
based on the
You
directive
did.
of the board.
you did.
No one's
So
I think you
not
did.
talking about
And I'm
yours.
not,
you-
I'm not questioning that, I just
So
asked to clarify where
I
it was coming from.
apologize for any confusion or misconstruction on that statement. It was
No.
not.
It's
That
not
was
you,
not
it's
the intention.
obviously Bob.
No,
so.
you did fine
Well, I'm
because
not
we.
gonna blame
Yeah.
Bob as chairman.
That's-
Anything
well,
that
that's
goes
what's
on here
happening.
falls on my shoulders, and that's
It's,
fine. I screwed up. Not gonna happen
No, it
again.
doesn't.
That's why I'm seconding her motion. From now on, all statements are now going to be a group board decision as far as I'm concerned.
Now, just for clarification, that means if we're putting out that kind of statement, if we're just doing municipal updates and I'm pulling them from the minutes of the meeting,
That's fine.
there's nothing wrong with
Yeah,
that.
I'm
So
fine with
I
that.
can go ahead and.
Any
and
special
make them-
announcements, however, will be now from the entire board.
All right.
Just,
That's the motion
just
and the second.
a message from the board should be a message from the board.
Well, parties.
So anyway, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
I'd like to make a motion.
Absolutely.
Since we're on the newsletter, I've got to launch the newsletter. I delayed the launch at Ms. Cullen's request so
Thank
that
you.
we could have this on the agenda and we can discuss it. There is that statement that you put in the banner that I believe is appropriate for the newsletter, and I want to make a motion that that statement get in the newsletter. It addresses direct, a lot of people are asking the questions that those answer. Why isn't this public? Why aren't we being told what's happening? And I think it's nothing but factual. And we can read that statement if we'd like to read it before we approve it for the newsletter. But I think it's perfectly appropriate. It was a statement from you, Brian, but I would recommend.
Well, that's,
that if
I'm pulling it up right now.
that if we go ahead and vote on this and we vote it in, we'll make it a statement from the select board.
I'll second
I'm
that
fine with
motion.
that.
So do we need to read the statement, or is the select board aware of what that statement is
totally
and
aware
we're
of what
it
and
says.
we're good with it?
I'm fine with it.
I've already, well, I obviously have read it.
Is that the, which phone
That
is
is-
that?
Oh, it could be Bob.
Yep.
Oh, did we?
No, that's the regular phone.
Oh, we
Just
We
says
need to
incoming
activate the
town of
phone.
Pownal.
Oh, we said we were gonna call him.
We're gonna
Yes.
call him.
Well, it's a
Would that be
980.
okay?
Somebody should call him and let him know it's not.
Okay.
All right. So we had a motion and a second to approve
To
the
approve
statement for the newsletter.
the chairman's
And it won't be a
statement.
chairman's statement, it will be a
Select
select
board.
board statement now.
Correct.
Okay, hold on, just
Right.
give me a second to write a chairman's statement, a select board
That's fine.
statement.
We all
So
had
Patricia
discussed
will
it.
no longer be answering any questions to the newspaper, just so you're aware. They will now
Sorry.
wait until the second meeting of every
So,
month.
and the other thing, I would just wanna make sure that if anybody has any comments about the bulleted items and how I've worded those, please let me know. I'm always open to make changes to the newsletter and content changes, format changes, any kind of changes. I'm always open to hearing what people want. But please read the bulleted statements too and make sure you're okay with the way that I've worded those.
All right, so we have a motion, and I believe there was a second.
Yes.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Okay.
Okay. So,
Forensic audit.
moving on to the forensic audit.
Mr. Graham,
Mr. Graham here.
he was in the back.
Is he out there?
Mr. Graham?
Mr. Graham?
Yeah, he's out. He was out front.
I request that we take a 5-minute break so we can call Mr. Fisher.
We have a motion to take
I
a
thought we were
5-minute break.
calling
I
him
will second
for
that. All in favor say aye.
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 No discussion on that one, everybody's.
No, I believe the full bladders have that say.
5-minute recess?
Yeah, we're taking a 5-minute recess.
Well, it might be more than 5 minutes with the
Wow,
line.
yes. Go ahead. Are you
Sorry.
pulling things around?
All right, so welcome back. It's our quick break. So I'd like to welcome Mr. Graham and Mr. Fox from Graham & Graham. They are forensic auditors. So they're going to be giving us a brief, well, I shouldn't say brief, they are giving us a preliminary update.
So I had put together a list of items that are sort of on our scope of work list that as we know it today. And an apology maybe is in order for the lack of time here in the last several weeks. I had a death in my family, and then I understand that Ellen also had a death in hers, and so having gone through that very recently, I thought it was probably helpful, if not appropriate, for us to give her a little bit of time. And we had to chat about that today, and I think that was welcome. So we're back. We're going to be here next week again and do a whole bunch of more stuff towards the end of getting the scope of work done. So what we have spent some time on is just going through all of the records that are available in paper form and electronically. And so that's the New England Municipal Resource Center software, as well as a whole pile of records in several boxes. So Dave and I have split up some of our duties, and we've gone through and looked for different items. So Dave has spent some time on town clerk related activities and reports, and I've gone through the general ledger and all of the documents to see what kind of a system you actually use to get an idea of what my scope would be in order to put together my list. So at this point, we haven't really finished anything in total. Like, I can't say that we've done everything for the town clerk, or we haven't done everything for the general ledger. We haven't done everything for the Vermont Municipal Employees Retirement System work that we were going to do. But I have a lot of early on sort of weather report findings for you. So in general, one of the things that I would look for is how strong is your internal accounting control system over the accounting transactions here at the town. And what that really means to me is somebody should be doing the original transaction, bringing the invoice in from a vendor, handling payroll as it comes through from your employees. Somebody should then be checking that to make sure that all of the pay rates are correct. The vendor was actually an authorized vendor. You got all of the quality that you expected from that work, the quantity, the price, and that it was ultimately posted to the proper account inside of your budgetary general ledgers. From there, it goes through the process of getting approval from the board through the warrant system and making sure that you believe that all of that work before you has been done. And after that, having the treasurer basically make sure that before the check gets cut, that last person's look at that transaction actually has his or her, in your case hers, work done to it as well. So that whole system is designed in a way to make sure that if the first person who did it missed something, the second person is designed to catch that person. And the third person or the third group is designed to check the first two, and first three, and that sort of stuff. So we had a discussion with Ellen today, and one of the things that she had said was she didn't feel that she was either required to or necessary to, before she signed her name, make sure that everybody before her was correct, that they had captured everything, caught everything. And I said, well, really, if you think about it, the treasurer's duty to the town and the town's people and the taxpayers is to make sure that everybody before you did their job. And if anyone or all of them missed the job, that her job is to catch that before she signs it. So I would say that about you for the people that are before you, and potentially those folks after you, because we have to do financial audits at the end of all this stuff. So the concept is everybody's human. Systems are different on a Monday than they are on a Friday. They're different the week before a vacation than they are the week after the vacation. All that sort of stuff that's human related. So we look at the system to see what kinds of checks and balances you have to make sure that as people look through those records, they acknowledge that they've seen it, they sign off on it, they date it, they make comments on it, they pass it back if they think that it's not quite correct. And that's what I was sort of looking at when I first came here, to see what kind of a system you have. So I think it's a little weaker than I would like it to be. And I think part of that is there's no real definite description of what everybody's responsibility is in that process. So you, I think in the past, had tried to put together an accounting manual where you would actually go through as a town and designate position names or elected position names to look at transactions. And so that's a fairly important piece to us coming in on the forensic side, where we say, if you can show us that you've done all 5 of those steps, and that it appears everybody during that process of your assigned spot did what they were supposed to, in the end, you should have a tight internal control system over those transactions.
Jeff, can I ask a quick question? This process piece that you're talking about right now, is that like the accounts payable or the accounts receivable?
So those would be spokes off the hub. So the hub for you is the general ledger. The general ledger is that software that resides in Nemrick. Mm-hmm. That's the repository for everything that happens. So it's sort of like the end of all of the transactions happening. So if I was going to draw a picture, and if you think of a spoke, so you have the hub in the middle and all the spokes off it, mm-hmm. One spoke would be cash receipts. Mm-hmm. One spoke would be billings of tax invoices to taxpayers. One would be payroll. One would be entries to the general ledger that were correcting something. We call them adjusting journal entries. There would be all these spokes that would be part of that, and they reside in the general ledger. So your general ledger, by the way, is 165 pages long. And so I went through the general ledger and went through each of the transactions through that 165 pages and said, is that transaction a transaction that I would expect to see inside of those individual account names? So cash accounts or checking accounts, receivables for taxes, delinquent tax receivables, anything that you owe like an accounts payable or payroll taxes. So each of those has a place within your accounting system. So when I went down through there and just visually scanned everything, I have a whole series of notes about stuff that I would go back and check on. So the system is really much larger than just accounts payable or billings or cash receipts. You have all of these transfer station places outside of here. You have the town clerk that's a different spot than the town treasurer. And there's building permit monies that are coming in and all these other things that can happen. So in this control system, in essence, you should capture every one of those transactions and have somebody actually look at those transactions and go through the process of reviewing what's been done to see if they agree that that's actually proper, complete, valued properly, the dollars that you were supposed to be charged in the contract. And so there's a local auditor, elected auditor part of that, but there's also board members and there's also other elected officials as part of that whole thing.
Right.
So it's not easy to just say this is one part of it, because there's probably 200 components to an internal accounting control system.
Well, I guess I didn't articulate the question correctly, but with the general ledger piece as a whole is more of an operations functionality of the town operations, correct?
It's a sophisticated spreadsheet.
Okay.
It's an electronic document.
Is that traditionally something that an elected official would manage, or is that something that an employee manages? It's just, there's so much going into it.
So it's part of the treasurer's function to handle that.
Okay.
Boards have actually hired bookkeepers or accountants or comptrollers to actually do that instead of the treasurer, or you could do that in connection with each other. Because the treasurer's duty is really to handle the money of the town, invest the money of the town, handle bond issuances, a whole bunch of statutory things. But that person typically is an accountant or a bookkeeper. So all of these records that you need in order to do the outside financial audit and to have your local auditors look at those transactions are in that software. And if the software is used to its fullest capacity and it's used properly and everybody sort of goes through the reconciliation processes, that to me tells me that you've got a strong system. So we'd like to have a couple of things tweaked in that system to strengthen it. And part of that is just the regular oversight. So you all have a part in that oversight, whether you be the elected auditors, whether you be the board, or you have an elected position as treasurer, clerk, administrative assistant, that sort of stuff. Somebody has to be the keeper of that. You really shouldn't have 12 cooks in there, so somebody has to be the cook. And everybody else feeds information through this control process to that set of general ledgers. So what we do is we look at how do you receive cash? How does somebody know they owe you money? And so we look at that process. How did they get their bill? How were they told they owe $10 a page to record? How do they pay for copies? How do they know what to pay at the transfer station? That sort of stuff. So we look at that. And then we go through the process of what's the logical step that we would look at as accountants, forensic accountants in that case, to make sure that we believe that all of that is captured correctly, completely, at the right values, at the right time. Timing is a very important thing in accounting. So we went through the clerk stuff because it was sort of it's a cash, so your highest risk is cash, period. You have a lot of other risks, but nothing, in a financial sense, nothing greater than cash. So we would look at early on in the process. If you do a really, really good job of controlling cash transactions, you probably do an even better job of everything else. Because the most difficult transaction to actually look at is cash. So the nature of the town clerk's office is to actually handle a lot more cash transactions, numbers of transactions during the year. So when we went through that, we're basically saying, how do we know that all of the deposits for recordings were made? So there's an easy way. You go to the book and page numbers, and you count all the book and page numbers in the fiscal year and multiply those times 10, and that's the theoretical gross that you should have for town clerk's recording fees. And then she gets paid her monies for handling those transactions as a clerk. So we say, okay, if hypothetically $1,000 was collected, was $1,000 paid. Or in your case, was $1,200 collected, and she got 1,000 of that because everything else, the 200 else, in my hypothetical, goes off to the state or somebody else. So we're looking for those kinds of transactions and just going through the flow of the transactions to see if it all makes sense. So I believe Dave Adams put together an Excel spreadsheet for the town clerk. And I'm not really a fan of it, to be honest. But it does its job for a lot of things, but the carry forward part of it is what bothers me. So when we looked at 60-ish of the Excel spreadsheets, part of it is there's a number that gets carried forward from a previous spreadsheet. And then there's the new revenues that have been earned and deposited. And then there's the payments that have been made to other organizations. And then there's the payment that's being asked for by the town clerk. When we went through the 60, 39 of them had errors in it. So when we looked at the errors, we were looking at beginning balances as being problematic. So if you could just follow through a couple of hypothetical transactions to make it easy on me, you start out with 0 as the carry forward. You have $1,520 earned that week. And in the clerk's case, she wanted to have a certain dollar amount paid to her and the rest of it left behind as a carry forward. So in that case, it was $1,000 that she asked to be paid for, and $520 was carried forward to the next week. So that in itself is not a bad transaction. I would rather it be $1,500 earned than $1,500 paid. That transaction is now totally completed, out of the way. You don't have to ever look at that. There's no risk of anything being wrong in the second part of the transaction. So when we looked at that, and we have all the statistics, and Dave has the worksheets that go along with it, the carry forward number wasn't always the proper carry forward number. So in my hypothetical, $520 would have been carried into week 2. So $520 was carried into week 2, and then other transactions happened, and then there was a new carry forward number. 5 weeks in a row, the carry forward number, and the one I'm remembering, was $360. Once, $360 was correct. The 4 weeks that followed, it wasn't. So we have this, now we have numbers that are either owed to the town or owed to the treasurer, to the clerk. And so Dave has a spreadsheet that he's worked up that says, here's what the form said, but here's what the number really was. And so you have this number that's carrying forward that's incorrect. So my thought process is, it's great to have a carry forward number if it's going to work and everybody's going to check it. But when that misses once, then you have all this other work that you got to do to it.
It perpetuates.
Yeah, so if you had a propane delivery at your house and they charged you $1,520 and you only had $1,000 in your checkbook to write the check, you probably wrote that right on the invoice. And the next check you wrote might have been for the balance of the $520, and that invoice goes into a file. In your case, it makes that more difficult if that process isn't checked properly. So my request of you was, I think, and this would be part of my ultimate report, have that be one transaction that gets handled once, period. You already have the money. It's already in the bank account. You can't possibly then have that carry forward number problem.
Just my question was going to be what is the rationale for the carryover then? I mean, no one would do the carryover if there wasn't some rationale for it.
My understanding was the clerk wanted to have sort of a level paycheck, if you will. And so instead of getting $1,520 in 1 week and $200 hypothetically the next, she was hoping to level that dollar amount out.
Okay.
I don't know that that's the only reason for it, but by doing that process, it makes more work for the town and it gives you a higher risk factor of cash.
All right. So and then what about going through the whole spreadsheet? What was the net difference?
So out of the 60, when we got done, $129 was owed to the town, but at one time it was $2,000, and it went up and down depending upon what time frame we're talking about. So that number in 2000, correct or no? I'm trying to remember that.
I believe it was about that.
Okay,
yes.
so it's roughly 2,000. It's not exactly 2,000. Would be my
So I think we can conclude from that there's nothing nefarious here. It's just a bad process that seems to stay fairly level. Not that it's a good thing. It's not, because it doesn't have to stay level. It could go. It could go off in one direction.
It's not a good practice.
So I know I can tell you that at June 30th, 2019, your number on your books was not the correct number because of all of those things that happened, and the number got lowered as July and August and September went by. But at a point in time, if you were going to look at that record, it was off.
Okay, and then,
Marlene has a question.
Yeah, you had mentioned about the board doing their due diligence and how we need to have checks and balances. But it was identified that when we knew that David was doing that spreadsheet with Julie and helping her track all that stuff, we did get confirmation that that spreadsheet did get handed in. But when the warrants got placed in the envelopes for the board to look at, that spreadsheet was taken out.
Okay.
So we've never seen that spreadsheet. So we didn't even have an opportunity to double
Verify,
check
yeah.
to see if there was something off about it because it's not coming to us. So we're not sure why it comes in and then it gets taken away.
So in my career, there's a bunch of little comments that have been made to me along the way that stuck with me. And I remember working as a really young gentleman, first out of college, trying to understand all those best practices. And the guy that I worked for had this little sign behind his desk that said, "Don't tell me, show me." So to me, that's a way to say, well, you've got a check here for hypothetically $1,000. Show me the backup that says we actually owe $1,000. So without that, I would ask you not to sign off on it. That would be the kickback, if you will, of how you would be doing your job to have a strong internal accounting control system. So if you find a request without all of the documentation behind it, you're at risk for not being correct.
So along that line, if our auditors are seeing it, because correct me if I'm wrong, Crystal and Dave, you see that spreadsheet when the warrants are prepared and you guys are going through them, correct?
Yeah.
So it's after they've done their check that it's removed and we as a board don't get to see it.
Right. So my statement to you would be sure that that's always included. That would be a directive to everybody here. Please provide, along with the request for a check, all of the backup that proves that that's actually a dollar amount that's owed to that vendor, employee, whoever it might be.
So include the spreadsheet.
But then along that line, when we come in to sign off on Fridays, the checks have already been issued and handed out. So even if there's a discrepancy and we say, no, we're not gonna sign the warrants, the checks have already been dispersed.
So I would say, again, this is part of my learning. My bosses would say to me and my auditors when I was younger, before I started my own practice, it's better to catch it 2 weeks after or 5 weeks after than after the end of the year, because you can correct it during the year. But once the year is ended, those records are sort of frozen, if you will, to be audited at a later date. And if it's small enough transaction, they may not get looked at all. So the sooner the correction, the better everybody is with respect to the accounting system. And that's that concept behind a strong internal accounting control system over those documents, is find it early. If you had a conversation with me yesterday, you probably remember more of the conversation than if it was a year ago. And that's sort of the same general logic. Because accounting and auditing really comes down to statistics. And the risk factor of something very small versus the risk factor of something very large. So if you have a dollar amount of $100, $200, $129, and it is not really material to the whole picture, you might skip over that one for the bigger stuff. So the concept behind the control system is find it early, have everybody have a definite task, and ask for those documents to be part of anything that you're being asked to sign off on. So that's, it's more work, there's no doubt about that. But once that system is in place and everybody understands that that's part of their job, long before you see it, all those things should be reconciled.
And my question is if the town clerk had had access to the town federal ID number and monies were actually being ran through here instead of a separate checkbook, would this potentially have not been an issue? Because we also have the issue of the town clerk is eating the credit card charges on her personal end. So I can see if she collects $1,000, she can't always give you $1,000 because one, there's credit card fees taken out that she's eating, and she has to keep a balance in her checkbook.
Yeah.
So
that's on my list. It's actually second on my list. So it's unique for Pownal to have a separate ID number used by the clerk, in my experience, versus the town in general. So if you think about all of the bank accounts that you have and all of the auditing that gets done, it's as a whole with the umbrella over the top of absolutely everything. And that really in some cases comes down to ID numbers. And so if you have FDIC insurance and the bank fails, they look for ID numbers. So if you have an ID number and everything's consolidated, they look at it as one entity. When the financial statements are audited, the first paragraph is the scope paragraph that says, we have audited the following entity. So if there's two different ID numbers, and the audit really is of everything except the town clerk, then you don't really have everything covered under the umbrella. So I'm not sure I understand all the dynamics of why you would have a second ID number. I just don't think that that's in your best interest as a town.
Could I answer that question?
Sure.
When the new town clerk asked for the identification number, the then board refused to give it to her. And so she went out and got her own.
It's actually not and I don't believe, I could be wrong, I don't think it's a town number, even though it's associated with town accounts. I believe she paid for it herself.
She did.
In order to be able to, open her account.
So if you imagine going into a bank these days, especially with Homeland Security and all the other issues, if you're opening up a brand new account under the name of the town of Pownal, they're going to ask for resolutions, they're going to ask for board meeting minutes, they're going to ask if that person's an authorized agent of the town to actually go open that up. There's probably no way that she could have gone to any financial institution and opened up a brand new account in the name of the town, because they would have sent her back here. So she must have it in her personal name.
That's probably true, and I know she worked with another town clerk in order to be able to do that.
Okay.
So she asked how to do it and took instruction on how to do it.
Yeah.
I'm not
believe
exactly
the
sure
name
of the process.
account is either Town Clerk of Pownal, Julie Weber, or Julie Weber Town Clerk.
No, it's Julie Weber, Julie Weber Clerk.
Clerk, Town of
the name.
Pownal or something like that.
No,
she
no
has a-
Town of Pownal.
Oh, just Julie Weber
Julie
Clerk.
is
So
the
she-
name.
So it's her, so it is really her own. So
Right, so she has her
when being
own-
audited as an entity, it wouldn't be included as the entity.
So think about this, and this is a generic response to a very specific question, so I apologize for that. But you don't have control if it's Julie Clerk, as if you have control if it's Town of Pownal. So you have a part of your operation that you may or may not be able to actually get access to, because you're not privy to those transactions if it's under her name. And even though her pay is, I'll say nearly 100% of what she brings in, it means that you may not have access to her original transactions to audit. So it's one of those splinters off of the town that doesn't necessarily get captured, because when your auditor comes in, he or she's probably not going to go get Julie Weber's clerk checking account information.
And I
If
just
it
want
was
to
town,
clarify
they would have.
that this was not Julie's doing. She was forced to do that because she wasn't allowed
I realize that.
the access to it,
And so I can't fix the past, but I can
Right.
recommend to think about fixing that going forward, because I
So
think,
how would you recommend fixing that?
do we have to move every transaction into?
so I would make sure that you have access to all of that background information that came to Julie before it came to you. And I would recommend that you allow that bank account to be part of the operating account here.
So
100
add town
group.
Pownal to it.
Yep. And have it be part of the under.
Put it under the correct federal
umbrella.
ID number.
Correct. And ask her to eliminate her ID number that has anything to do with the town of Pownal's transactions. And what that does is it means you have total access to everything that happened that had to do with activities inside the office. And that's under the purview of the town of Pownal. Once you start to splinter that off, then you don't have total access to all of those things, just by their general nature, especially if it's a different ID number.
Is she
I can see.
regulated by other entities outside of, like, isn't her
State
appointment
statute.
by legislation or something of that sort?
We came into this, so we don't.
I
don't
I
have that.
believe, and if that's the case, such as like myself, where I was appointed by the town or recommended by the town, but appointed by the state, that would actually make her a private entity.
Well, she's an elected official.
She's an elected official.
To the town.
She was elected.
Right.
But does it fall
there's-
under that statute?
She's on payroll for the town. The town pays her. So she's a
Town
town
pays
employee.
me,
You're a town employee.
but I'm not a town employee. I'm a state employee. I have an ID card that is from the state of Vermont. not the town
Yeah,
of Pownal.
I think, yeah, I'm not sure what the difference is. I think the health officer is definitely different.
Right.
Because if we didn't have, I believe we would be okay to, well, actually, I'm not sure of that. If we didn't have a town clerk,
The
no
health
one ran
officer
for it.
derives their power and authority
From the state.
Right.
But if we didn't, if a town clerk didn't get elected, would we be appointing them, or would we be recommending them and having the state appoint the same way this
we
happened with
recommend
health
until the
officer?
term.
Yeah.
So your paycheck comes from the state?
Do we know that?
No, my paycheck would come from the town because part of my legal thing is to negotiate with the town a payment for services.
Because I mean,
That's the way
technically,
it's
we as a
written.
town don't have to pay the health officer. We could say he gets no stipend. We could reimburse for expenses.
Right.
Doesn't mean he would agree to do the job.
Right.
But
So my question
the stipend
is,
is
I
more
know
like
there was-
compensation to try to keep somebody in the job.
I know when she first got into office here, I know there was a bunch of legalities on who actually controlled her in her job duties. So my question was, that's why I brought up the question of, okay, is she actually a private entity because she's controlled by other sources? That's just,
And I
I'm
would
just
say no.
throwing that out there.
I would say no.
Okay.
So she is elected by the town taxpayers, voters, and she is in a position that's covered by Vermont statute. And there's a whole list of responsibilities of a town clerk. And there's responsibilities to work with other officers within the town, as laid out by the Vermont League of Cities and Towns and the 24 VSA, all that whole chapter.
Right.
So part of her remuneration is not hers, it's the town's to then distribute to her in the agreement that you have with her. Whether that's you get 100% or you get paid a salary. And so in her case, she gets both. She gets a salary and she gets other kinds of things if she's here and collects copies. She gets the copy stuff. If she's not here and the copy's made, it stays within the town. So there's all these rules that go along with it. But to have a different ID number for somebody that's elected for the town defeats all kinds of purposes. And if there's an accident, by the way, she's covered by the retirement system, the VEMR's retirement system. She's covered by benefits. She's covered by all kinds of stuff that you can't get unless you're an employee of the town hall. So there's all those facts that go into it. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to get into legal stuff. But there's all those financial facts that go into how she then operates as part of the overall entity approval of the voters.
Okay. All right, so we need to work with her to get her back into the umbrella of the
I think
town.
it's proper, and I think that that's a very wise thing for you to do, because then all of the transactions are auditable, and all of those transactions can find their way to the books. And without that, you don't know whether all of the revenues that are due to the town have actually been collected by the town.
Right, but then the downside would be that it's no longer compartmentalized. So now, once it's I don't know, it always seemed to me to be a benefit to have it compartmentalized so that now anything goes wrong in this account, it's only traceable to one person. Something goes wrong in this account, it's traceable to one person.
Well, she should have her own ledger that's coming through.
She'll have her own account.
Yeah,
Just the
Jeff
same
said
ID.
to just eliminate her tax ID number, but allow her to keep the checking account.
Right.
Just put it under the town's tax ID number.
So she would have to close that
And open
have
a new
one because it would be a different ID number. And
Right.
the bank wouldn't let you have that.
And then that
transfer.
way, by doing that, any credit card payment she takes, she would not have to eat those fees, correct? Once she becomes an entity of the town.
Depends on what your compensation arrangement is with her.
Well, she would be able to probably utilize MuniCiPay instead of
Yes,
her using a
correct.
point of sale system that she set up herself, so she could take credit card payments.
So in
So
MuniCiPay.
that would assist, yeah.
So the percentage that's added to that, you get your net exactly equal to the invoice amount. So
Okay.
Correct.
So in that case, nobody eats it other than the taxpayer
Right.
or the
Okay.
user.
Or
That
the
I
end
think-
user.
Yeah,
So in the big picture,
so
it's
that
more
wouldn't take
beneficial.
anything away from her, she would actually
Correct.
gain what she should have been
Correct.
getting all along.
So, so third topic, if I can. So if you can imagine all of these transactions that are developed by third parties. So somebody comes in and gives you money, you send out an invoice, a vendor sends you a bill, your employees give you a time card and you pay them. that's all stuff that you can go back to individuals who are part of that sort of request of the town. The part that is done internally by the treasurer in this case are all the adjusting journal entries where an account balance gets changed, two account balances at a minimum get changed. So I remember being a young accountant and going through this process and learning that I couldn't just do an adjusting journal entry, put it in the books. I had to run it up the flagpole of everybody that wanted to see that we were changing an account balance. Because if you remember right, what happens is the original stuff gets looked at by everybody here. The auditors, the treasurer, the clerk, and then somebody else at the very tail end of that changes that account. So in general, when everybody here has said, yes, that's the proper amount, it goes to the proper account, timing-wise, vendor, all that sort of stuff, if all that is approved, and then somebody decides that they're going to change that, and you don't know about it, you've defeated the entire control purpose. So one of the things that I think should also be provided to you are any adjusting entries before they're posted, or if not before they're posted, before that month gets closed out. So an adjusting journal entry is, okay, we had a $12 service charge from the bank. We're going to reduce the bank balance by $12 and we're going to charge this expense account called service charge. Or we put some money into the reappraisal account that really should have gone into the building renovation account or purchase account. So we want to really change those account balances because they just were put in the right account, but they were posted in the general ledger to the wrong place. So it's this person or people that can have access to your accounting system that singularly make the decision to make changes to your account balance. And that's the highest risk that you have of non-cash is where somebody comes in and does that. So we did an audit a couple of years ago for a really large Vermont entity, municipal entity. It was all of the people in the room did all of the reviewing of all of those transactions, and the person at the end did $2.2 million worth of changes to account balances, and they never knew it. So when we were doing our audit, we said, well, okay, 90% of everything you looked at was approved. This 10% wasn't. Why not? Well, they said we didn't even know what happened. So that's the risk that you take, is you go through this whole process of making sure it goes to the right budget line item. It goes through the process of going to everybody that should have some say of that, and then one person takes that. And that's not to say that that person did something that was wrong. It just means they didn't run it through that accounting control process. Because if it's right, you would want everybody to sign off on that. So that's my third biggest recommendation so far, is that you have a lot of that happening in your books, where there's a lot of transactions that are being changed for account balances without that same level of review, that 5 levels, if you will, that everything else happens. So it should be 100% of your transactions, not just 90 or 80 or whatever the magic number might be.
Are you going to be presenting to the board the total dollar amount that's been changed after the original approval process?
There's a function inside of NEMRIC that actually tells us all of the adjusting journal entries that were made. So that number is really easy to find.
That would
So
be
they
great
report-
if you could let us know.
But it's
because
not
I'm sure
missing, it's just in the wrong ledger, is what you're saying.
It's been not approved.
It's been not approved, it's been moved without approval.
Okay.
So you all said, put it in box A.
Right.
Somebody goes and puts it in box
Somebody
B.
shifted up.
It's
After
okay
we
that it's in box
authorized
B, because most times it's probably correct. But you probably want to know that it went from A to B, just so that that's part of
Yes.
your management. That's all. That's
That
all
way
I
we
wanted
can
to
keep
say.
it in black and white.
Right. So the other thing that we saw, to go back to the town clerk stuff, is there's a transaction column that's called pending. So I'm not really sure I understand what pending means.
Okay, what happens is that the IRS
Yep.
generates a transaction. Okay, it's entered into NEMRIC, as it should be. The only problem is that the IRS hasn't given us the money. The system, the way it's designed, is that because of timeliness, the transaction has to be recorded, so we've always got something hanging out there that we haven't received the money for.
That's accounts receivable.
So I think you're susceptible to having that money paid twice to the town clerk. Because if she's being paid for that before it's been deposited on that Excel spreadsheet, and then when the money gets deposited, it goes into the column again because it's money's received.
No. We're basically running two systems, as you know. The spreadsheet that I do.
Yeah.
On that spreadsheet, if she puts it in pending, she will not get paid for that. Okay? When that money comes in, she then references that pending and then includes that in a payment. Okay, it's a bastardized system, to say the least.
Does she enter that on the Excel spreadsheet, or does it come in and does it get put as IRS payment, $10 here, $10 there, whatever the amount might be?
She'll put the IRS payment and she'll put it in the pending column.
Right.
Okay, until the money comes in.
When it comes in, I'm saying, does she put it back on the spreadsheet as IRS this or IRS that?
No.
Okay.
No, she does not.
So where does it go?
So how does it get brought in, I guess? Is that because I've seen those where I've seen IRS payment of, whatever it is, just going through the
Denominations of $10.
Right. And so they're small amounts, but who's to say who gets that, I guess?
Sometimes some of that gets directly deposited into your treasurer's checkbook.
Yep.
And then our town clerk gets told, hey, I have it, you can get paid. So then there's that sticky mess too, because it's sitting over here and she needs to get paid for it. But we've never can put all the pieces
But I'm
together.
gonna say, how do you know that it gets deposited?
Because Ellen gives her a copy and says it's here, you can pay yourself for it.
So when the first one, the $10 gets put in, the line delineation in that Excel spreadsheet is IRS.
Mm-hmm.
Could you put IRS Graham, IRS Fox, IRS whomever? So that when it does get collected, it says IRS Graham, IRS Fox. So then there's a connection between those two transactions of pending versus actually collected. Because that would be a way that you could be assured that you had full knowledge of that transaction. And then does somebody keep a record of the pendings to make sure you actually collect the money? That's the other piece.
Dave's been working with that.
It's something you'd have to search through.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there is no separate ledger for that.
So we see the names when it's deposited. We don't see the names when it's put in pending. So just like you send a tax bill out, you wouldn't necessarily say tax bill number 1 with no name on it, tax bill number 2 with no name on it. You probably would be more likely to catch somebody not paying you if you had a name associated with it.
And the other is, besides just a deposit entry, electronic deposit entry into your account, is there another email or another backup stating, they paid that coming in? Because otherwise,
well, that's why I asked if
it's
it
hard
went back to the Excel, because if the treasurer does let the town clerk know that the money's come in, then you could just put it back on the Excel spread as saying, this was pending on this day and now it's here, and add it to the Excel spread, because it would
Right,
be...
but we can't write the check back to the town because the town already has that $10. So then that makes it another stickier step for us in that spreadsheet.
I guess the other part that I'm just trying to figure out is, say the
Where if we
IRS
had
owes us 10 payments, because you said you're using $10 increments. So I get my login, I see IRS $100 deposit. That's not telling me who that is. That's where I'm saying, where's the check
And I don't
on
know
the balance on who it
what we
is?
get, I believe what she gets is just a copy from the bank statement saying that it's come in.
Yeah.
But it's hard to match up where that money comes from.
Right, that's
It's just
where
the
I'm
bank
saying
statement comes in.
that's messy.
She gets that's why I said if we had one account where those monies came in, we wouldn't have the pools. And
Yeah, but without
does the
a deposit
treasurer
number.
Does the treasurer give the town clerk a copy of that transaction saying it's come in here?
Yes, she
Yes,
gives
she
a
does.
copy of the bank statement.
Okay.
Yes.
So we just think you could tighten that up a little bit.
Could I propose a different solution, which would be much easier? That if no ticky, no shirty, if the IRS sends something in and there's no money for it, it sits in a to be posted file, and we get rid of all this mess.
I would like the pending to go away, because that really is a document that says we've collected this cash. And so pending is sort of contrary to that concept of that document, which is that you've deposited cash. It hasn't come in yet. We know the transaction exists, and you have to wait for the IRS to pay it. But I'm not sure that it should be on that, because it muddies the water with respect to whether that could be paid twice. And I'm not saying that we should overkill the concept, but just one of those things that we thought.
Well,
would
it
pass along.
is an extremely hard thing to control the way we're doing it.
It's hard to follow.
So we'll
Yes,
help you
it
define-
is.
We'll
So-
sit with you and talk about that stuff if you want. We
That'd
can
be
come up with a system that works for everybody.
Okay.
Shouldn't take too long.
It usually the IRS it pays within 2 months. So.
And just to, let's make sure we include Julie in that discussion.
Yeah. Right. Yeah,
Because
sure.
we sort of impose that, giving her the number without even asking her if she wanted it. Or I didn't engage her in that discussion. Let's not surprise her again.
Right.
Right, and the treasurer.
So different topic if I can?
Yep.
Moving
Yes.
through my
Yep.
list.
All
So
right.
VEMR's, Vermont Municipal Employees Retirement System. Very vast number of rules or no rules at all in terms of a lot of different stuff. So I talked to Jennifer Grace yesterday, actually at VEMR's, and I went through the process with her and went through who is entitled to retirement payments to be made on their behalf, what salary, what compensation dollars, if they're elected versus employees, and all that sort of stuff. So it's safe to say that when the town of Pownal first signed up in 1975, there was an application. That application's on file at VEMR's. They can't give it to me because I'm not privy to that document, but one of you on the board could actually write and say, please provide us with all copies of all records in our file. Because I think what you're going to find out from that in the discussions that Dave and I and Jennifer had were the original document has a list of series of questions that were answered by the town at that time. And that original document says, for instance, the treasurer can be part of the system or not. Elected positions can be, so you have to take all the elected positions as one, and then all the employees are a whole different answer. There's Group A, Group B, and Group C. So where I'm headed with this is you don't have the document here that actually says who is eligible, but it is up at VEMR's. And if you have it here, so people don't bring it out and check it from time to time. And the other part of the question and answer process is if the voted dollar amount for the treasurer is known, is that eligible or not? And that was your answer back in 1975. Every town's different when it comes to all those answers. And if that person is also the delinquent tax collector, are the monies that they paid included as gross payroll, or are they not included? And that was an answer that was given in 1975. And if that person is the backup for the payroll processing and she gets paid an hourly rate for that, is that dollar amount included? So I can't really answer those questions for you, but you as a town have answered that in 1975. Now, towns also are able to change that. And so what Jennifer Grace said was, send us, get the 1975 document, and if there's any changes that have happened since then, she'll give them to you. Look at that and see if that's your policy. And if you don't think that that's the policy that you should have currently, then you can have that discussion, change it, go through the process of how you change it, and either leave it alone and just use that as your boilerplate for who's eligible and who's not.
So even if you change town policy, if you don't change the policy that VEMR's has on file, what the town policy doesn't trump it?
So how do they know that you've changed your policy unless you send them that document? That's pretty much what she
I just wanted to clarify.
And I think our town policy states what the VEMR's rules are, which is you have to work a minimum of 24 hours per week to qualify. But I think what Mr. Graham is saying is until we get the application, we don't know
How it was
who
originally set up.
qualifies.
All right, so who wants to reach out to VEMR's and get that information for us? Any volunteers?
The person's name is Jennifer Grace. She's at the VEMR's office, the state treasurer's office.
I'll shoot her an email tomorrow. I'll CC the board.
If you go to the website for VEMR's, right at the very bottom of the website page,
Yep.
it has all the contact information
Okay.
in there. So it's your call collectively. I'm not sure that it's the five of you only, but collectively it's your call and who gets eligible for that and who's not. And if you see something in the 75 document that's not how you handle it today, you probably should have that discussion. And who's
Interesting.
eligible and what dollars of payment are eligible is part of that whole walk down the cafeteria line and take the stuff you want and leave the stuff behind. That's pretty much the concept of how VEMR's is set up.
Okay.
There's no one answer, there's no one mandate for 251 towns. You all have the ability to tell them exactly what you want, and then you should follow that.
That's good.
So the bottom line is, whatever we decide, VEMR's has to be up to speed with what we've decided.
Correct.
Because right now, we're out of sync. We're 1975 versus
Maybe.
2019.
We're definitely probably out of
Yeah,
sync.
Well, almost certainly, but
So, but I understand it's a trigger point for a lot of discussion in town. So that would be a way to get rid of that trigger point
Mhm.
and just say, okay, here's what we have officially on file at VEMR's, but is it really what we want to do now? And you can fix all
Right.
those things just by getting that document or that series of documents. And she said your file's really thin. There aren't a lot of documents to look at. So, and her mandate was that somebody here ask for that as opposed to her sending it to me. When you get it, I'd love to have it, but it's not something you gotta come to you first.
Okay. That's different than how Harry or Jamie, it was explained to us internally that you can take all positions and add them all together and
Yeah.
qualify for VEMR's.
So that's one of the
why
options.
it's good to know that
Right.
if that's not what that says, then
no,
that's
he
just
said
been
that
practice.
is one of the options.
That is one of the
Right. So
options.
it's up to us how we do it, but we have to keep VEMR's in sync with what we're doing,
Correct.
is what I'm understanding.
Right.
That is one of the options, so I don't think we're outside of the bounds there.
So that's part A. Part B is, just like the adjusting journal entries, I don't think you've ever seen that document.
No, none of us
When
have.
you send those monies up, those monies go because a person here filled out all that stuff, cut a check, and sent it off on its way. So somebody should also be signing off on that before it actually gets sent to make sure that all of your rules are being covered when that payment is actually being made. And it's not uncommon for an error to be made, accumulation of job titles and positions that you say shouldn't be accumulated together. That's or that all three are eligible, but you only added two in, or three are eligible and you only got one in. So you want to make sure from a risk perspective that you've gone through that process of checking all that stuff too. It's a very big dollar amount.
Yeah.
And it's a very important thing to a lot of people that are employees.
Just
They have
learn
your
the big-
retirement accounts. That's correct. So just one more thing to add to your list. But
You
but it's an
auditors
important
gonna
part.
get busier.
So the other thing is settling of accounts. So there are two parts to settling of the accounts. There's the select board request for settling of accounts, and there's the local auditor's request for settling of accounts. And when you look through the statute, the information to be sent to the auditors and the information to be sent to the select board are different. They don't mirror each other exactly. There's some commonalities to it, but the auditors get financial statements, they get balance sheets, they get cash balances, they get all the nuts and bolts and nitty gritty stuff. You would get more of a oversight of those sorts of things. And there's a 5-day rule for auditors and there's a 25-day rule for the select board. So the concept is every March you have elections. And
This
maybe
is what we were given.
That's what
Okay.
we were given, but that's supposed to be for the auditors.
Okay.
And so we'll need your input as to whether it's the right stuff.
Ellen and Dave and I talked about it today, and we went through the process. And actually, I think the conversation today was really helpful because all of the angst about us being here and from the office, I think maybe get displaced a little bit today. And it was just a combination of here's why we're here, here's what we're looking for. We're trying to do an evidentiary kind of review of stuff. This isn't political, this isn't taking sides, this is us doing our job professionally and making sure that we pass it along to everybody else. And so I think that was sort of the elephant in the room for a while, and I just try to take that away as much as possible. I think that happened today. And I would hope that Ellen said that, and Wendy was here also, and I purposely wanted to make sure that there was more than one person here with Ellen, or somebody with Ellen, to just have that sort of comfort level. So it went, I think, really well. I think
I was here for part of it, a very small part of it, and we've had some email communication. I got to say, I'm very impressed with the professionalism and the
Well, thank you.
objectivity.
It's important to us that you get exactly what you're asking for. It's important to us that we don't come in and burn the ground behind us or in front of us or whatever. It's not what our job is. It's to be here and help instead of hinder. And so part of the whole thing is just communicating what we're doing and why we're doing it. And remedial in nature as opposed to punitive. That's pretty much what we like to think about it as. We'd like to be here to help kind of tweak the stuff and get it so that it's fine-tuned and running better, as opposed to just constantly being kind of adversarial positions.
Without going into the, just to make I just got to restate it that October was a horrible month for a lot of people. So
Yes,
that
it was.
added to the angst, and that added to the angst, I'm sure, and on both sides. I mean, it was disappointing. I mean, it was well, tragic, I guess.
Yeah, I spent most of my days in a hospital. I'd rather not be there for sure.
Yeah.
Not being personally, but
And Ellen too. And so it was,
Right.
on, it certainly, I'm sure, caused delays and other things.
agreed. So the settling of accounts is really a list of items to have everybody take a look at, whether it's the auditors or the select board. And the statute says you're entitled to ask for that whenever you feel it necessary, and there's a certain amount of information that gets presented when that happens from the treasurer. And there's a certain number of days that they're supposed to provide that, and you should all feel comfortable that if you got everything you were looking for, you can move on. If not, you can keep asking for that sort of stuff.
And that's not something I think we've done in the past. We haven't done much of that in the past at all, right?
Right.
So I think there might be a learning curve for exactly what are we asking and how to go about doing it.
Yes.
And so we need to be clear about that, and then we can get it on a more regular basis.
Yeah, so if you have local auditors, that's one scenario. If you have outside auditors, they basically step in the place of the local auditors unless you do that first. So depending upon timing, because the local auditors are going to be here 25 days before town meeting and 5 days before town meeting, the outside auditors may not be. So if you have a combination of the two, the easiest is for the local auditors to get the settling of the accounts.
So you're talking about the settling of accounts on an annual basis? I thought it was more of on a requested basis.
The statute says at least annually, the treasurer must provide the select board within 25 days and the auditors within 5 days before the March town meeting.
Right, and that's something that we have always done.
Right.
What we haven't done is by request, intermediate.
So the statute in 24 VSA, whatever it is, covers all of that stuff that you can ask for and that the treasurer is required to give up in terms of information.
Okay.
And you can read it, and it's really pretty basic.
I read part of it. I fell asleep.
Yeah, I was going to say that. If you
Jeff,
didn't.
is there a recommendation for the frequency that really the internal auditor should be looking at the full picture of the accounts so that the select board is fully engaged?
So by statute, the treasurer is supposed to provide a full accounting every 90 days. So that 90-day period could be at the end of September, December, March, and June. And that would, I think, include a full copy of your general ledger, the detailed general ledger, the 165 pages, because it gives every transaction that's been posted the changes in account balance. And that's sort of the reason to have a set of books, is to be able to see all those transactions. I have it on my thumb drive. If I had it printed, I could show you what that looks like. But just imagine your personal check register being 165 pages long. And what goes into your check register? Checks that you've written out, deposits that have been made in, interest that's been posted, service charges that have been charged. All that stuff is all showing in there. So, and then you could theoretically extend that to be how much I paid for insurance, how much I paid for payrolls, how much I paid for taxes, repairs, all the other things that are in your budget. So the general ledger captures every transaction that's been posted. Now that doesn't always mean that it's every transaction, which is where this part comes in, where you have to have somebody kind of go through that. And then if it's not your forte, you bring in an outside auditor and have that done, or you bring your local auditors in and see if there's transactions that aren't being covered.
So when you say a full accounting of the financials,
Yep.
you mean we should be getting something more than just a summary statement of total dollar amounts or batch dollar amounts, or a statement that says GL with a dollar amount, GL with a dollar amount, GL with a dollar amount?
Correct. So that's not in detail. That's in a summary level. So you should, I think. So I take a look at this, because I had this discussion with Ellen today. Really, what I think I would want to do if I were in her position, I've been there many times, is to have a clean slate issued by somebody outside of me. If I'm doing the books for your town, I really want to have somebody come in and say, Jeff, you've done exactly what you're supposed to, and here's how we know that. So when you have a treasurer that's in, and that person's handling the town taxpayers, voters' money, it's really important to have that outside look coming in saying, yes, you did everything you were supposed to, and if you didn't, here's how you should change it. So I said to Ellen today, you should really think about that as a compliment to your work as opposed to a adversarial look at your work. Somebody comes in and says, yes, you did a good job, everybody likes to know that. And everybody, I think, with their head in the right place says, okay, I missed a couple things, now I just gotta go tweak my work that I do on a regular basis. That, I think, if you get that, you can have an opportunity to say, well, Graham and Graham shouldn't be in insurance, it should be in accounting. And if you had a repair and maintenance, it shouldn't be in payroll. You know, those are the kinds of things that you could identify. And if you said, well, how much money do we have left in the budget? You'd know that on a 90-day basis. You'd say, here's our budget number for the year, here's how much has been posted against that budget line item. Now we can make management decisions based on that number being known on a close enough basis so that you can actually say, yes, we want to do that or not.
You're getting that every month.
I
Budget
am.
versus actual.
I am getting a budget versus actual. I'm using it for the newsletter. That's all I really do it for, and I don't do it at the line item level. I have to roll those up into the account level so that the newsletter isn't 17 pages long.
So
but that's about.
I asked you about the budget changes today. So my scenario with that would tie right in, segue into that nicely, because you have a really tough winter and you've got all kinds of overtime hours, you've got all kinds of product, and you've got repairs to vehicles because they've been run a whole bunch more. All that, and you have to bring in part-time people to help. All that stuff affects the overall budget of the town. So if you've got money you need to allocate towards winter road maintenance, where do you get that money from? If you have those reports, then you can say, okay, we didn't spend all $16,000 on insurance, we spent $12,800. So we logically can take some money out of insurance and kick it into winter road maintenance. Those are the sorts of management decisions that you can make if you have access to that information. Right now, I don't think you have that.
Well, we do get a monthly, but to that point, it's hard to get it. It's not a trend, right? It's a monthly statement. You don't really get the trend line because you're in that same example. You're obviously going to spend a lot less in the summer months because you don't have the road crews out, and you would expect a spike in the winter.
Yes.
But that would cause your trend line to look like you're trending way up here, but then it's going to drop off again before the end of the fiscal year. And so it's hard to get a sense of, unless it's something like office supplies, which you can get a more linear sense.
If you split your budget between summer maintenance and winter maintenance, or winter road and summer road, that gives you the ability to chunk it up into 5 to 7 months and 7 to 5 months, whatever it might be. And you could have a pretty good idea of, oh man, we're in trouble in dollars and cents in the winter road maintenance budget because of all the stuff that's happening.
Oh, that's a good sense. That's a good point. And it would have a smaller turn.
In NEMRIC, can they put in, because I know in some softwares you put in, here's your whole budget, and they just divide it over 12 months. In NEMRIC, because I haven't operated with it, can they go in and increase their budget lines in winter for those people who need it?
Well, no, to his point, I think you wanted to make 2 line items, right?
Yes.
I don't. Well, my guess is you can't do that because it's NEMRIC.
It's popular. It's popular to create a new account, leave one in as winter maintenance, retitle it, and put another one in as summer road maintenance, and then post the things that happen in the summer to summer road and the things that happen in the winter to winter road, and have a budget for each one of those, and you can start to see that draining it down.
But you'd still get a linear, right? You would get 0 on the winter until November, and then you'd start seeing a spike. But it's still at 12 months for that one budget line item.
Correct. Or if you went and bought salt in July because it's the best time to buy salt, hypothetically, you could post that to winter maintenance in July, but you know it was just salt.
Yep.
So those are the sorts of things that help everybody sort of do their management tool process.
So we do have it. I think we do have it at that kind of detail, like salt and things like that. I roll them up just so I can report on the budget to make it something that will fit in a newsletter.
Marlena has something to say.
Yeah, I think the report, you're the only one getting that monthly breakdown, whatever it is. And I know that the reports that we were getting don't have that detailed line item.
I think anybody
It's
can
more
run.
batched.
If you have access to NEMRIC, I think you can run it yourself. Because the first one I actually got from Linda, and I was kind of over her shoulder and saying, I think that's it. You can just output that. So. And anybody, I mean, if we want, we can have Ellen send it when she sends it to me. Just copy the whole board. All I do is once a month reach out to her and say, "Can you send me that monthly?"
Well, and I think to what Jeff is saying is that somebody should be monitoring that monthly and then matching it up against the budget to see really how we're doing.
To see where we're fitting.
Right.
So you could give your road foreman that information about winter maintenance, summer maintenance for roads. You could have the board look at insurance costs.
Right.
You could have the treasurer start to use that to develop a spreadsheet for the next budget. All those things that are helpful to everybody could be part of those reports that you look at on a semi-regular basis.
But again, I don't get into the detail. I put in formulas to roll it up and to sum it up so that I can get something that's a little less detail.
Right, because I was thinking about when we had the budget meeting with Tom and we asked for a breakout of that one line item and everything was just batch 1 through 12 with a dollar amount. I mean, that doesn't tell us anything.
Right.
And then they're like, oh, most of it was mileage, and some of it was office supply. Well, why wasn't it broken out into an office supply line item and a mileage line item? Instead, it was under training and education with 12 batched line items, but that's what they were called. Batch, and I'm just making hypothetical, it's like batch 1 through 12.
Right.
It didn't tell us anything.
You have titles that are, they're not intuitive. So when I look at your 165 pages today, when I looked at the string of the name of the title, it was like apple, cement blocks, and baseball bats in there. So it's sort of like, why would you put all that in one place? We might want to break those apart. Now, nobody wants to look at another 100 line items, so I get that piece. And if the baseball bat's only $12, who cares? But if they're larger and you start to see that those things aren't really intuitive, then you might want to bust those apart a little bit more.
You haven't played cement block baseball before?
I haven't.
Must have broken a lot of bats.
So the other elephant in the room typically is elected positions and their statutory, I'll call them entitlements because they really are. They're elected to do a certain job the way they want to do it, and the consequences of that sometimes are that there's a little silo and they sort of keep tabs on that silo for themselves. I was born in Springfield, Vermont, a long time ago, so I've been here a long time in Vermont. One of the complaints that I have about this system is they make it really hard for people to interact regularly. If you're all one company and there was sort of like a sharing concept between everybody, it'd be a lot easier. But we have elected positions, and those elected positions come with a whole bunch of sets of rules that make it really hard for everybody to interact, play well in the sand together. So part of that, I think, is developing maybe a little bit of an internal document that says, here's how we play in the sand. We'd like everybody to play well in the sand, but these are the things that we are going to share with everybody else so that you can have all the tools that you'd like for your jobs. And with that document where everybody's sort of in the same room negotiating that at the same time, I think that makes everybody's time here effective, efficient, get what you want, and then go back home and do the things you really would rather do than operate the town. So when I see some of the turmoil that's here, I think part of that is there's maybe that hasn't been effective yet. You haven't really had a chance to get to that point where everybody says it's in the best interest of the town to have a share, so let's do that. And if you can get everybody together that's in those sort of silos saying, yes, we will, I think you'll all be happier. And that's just my observation, I think, early on. And I understand why a treasurer should do what a treasurer does, and a clerk should do what a clerk does, and a board should do what the board does. But you're all in the same sandbox. And so I just want everybody to feel like you're getting everything that you want. And that might just be a good way to sort of take that out of the elephant out of the room kind of thing.
Now, what about in our situation where we have the administrative assistant and the treasurer kind of sharing duties and one doing...
You should. That's part of my segregation of duty thought here that I've got. So you have to manage risk. Whether you know this or not, you have to manage risk. And whether you want to do it or not, you have to manage risk. And the risk that you have in financial transactions is that somebody considers that their money instead of town money. And when that happens, bad things happen. So the segregation of duties is the person that sends the invoice shouldn't be the person that posts the payments against that invoice. The person that's doing that shouldn't be the person that's reconciling the bank statement and shouldn't be handling the general ledger. You should have 4 different people doing 4 different incompatible jobs. And if you can't do that, that's where the local auditors come in, and that's where you as a board come in, and that's that step process of controls where you go through and look at all that. Now, in a small town, the segregation of duty is harder, but it's not impossible. And then everybody has to play in a sandbox well with each other, and that's the part that I would love to see you sort of work out, where you can have all of those people doing all that stuff all at once. So you really should think about how do we make those people not so susceptible to having too much stuff in their job description so that they have their own silo and nobody can look in the silo. Because that's not great for your risk management. And it doesn't make it easy for everybody else to come in and do that. And candidly, we get hired a lot to go in and look for fraud because of those kind of situations. And we find it in many cases that that's what's happening when that silo is erected and the thing's in concrete and nobody wants to let anybody inside of that. So it's in everybody's best interest to have that be very transparent, looking through a window instead of trying to go through concrete.
I think one of the things that last year's external auditor made very clear in their auditor report was that we should look at hiring someone with an accounting background to do some of the stuff that you said earlier in, I think, items 1 and 2. And we've talked about it as a board, but we haven't moved forward yet. But we have identified that duties that are outlined under the administrative secretary's job functions, the treasurer has been doing, unbeknownst to us until recently. And so because it's an elected position, we can't hold them accountable. Theoretically, we could, but we've been told that they don't report to us, so we can't do anything. So it's tough when you're in that situation where if we're being told by the treasurer who's elected, I don't report to the board, and you can't tell me what to do.
Right.
But they're doing job functions that are under the administrative secretary's role. That makes it tough. So I think as a board, we do have to take what the external auditor's recommendation was seriously in order to do that separation or segregation of duties.
So
kind of maintain some control.
So from my perspective as a person as an accountant, there's a bunch of stuff that you learn that's really bookkeeping, and then there's a bunch of stuff that you learn that's really accounting, and then there's a bunch of stuff that you learn that's really auditing. And then there's a bunch of stuff you learn that's really governmental accounting. They're not the same. You can go into a corporation and do accounting, and you go into a municipal government, and the roles are totally different. So if you don't have somebody that's of that kind of a background that comes in and understands GASB 34 and all the stuff that got changed in the requirements from way back in the 90s, and you don't have somebody that understands what happens when you transfer between funds and when you spend dollar amounts that in business would be considered something that needs to be depreciated over a period of time, but you buy that same thing here and it gets written off it gets expensed all that 1 year. There's so many different rules that are the tip of the top of accounting in governmental that if you have somebody that hasn't been trained in that and doesn't follow that, is not curious and inquisitive, and either doesn't go to training for one reason or another, they can't really stay up with all that stuff. So the reason to hire somebody like that would be that that person's more, I don't want to say educated because that's not a fair term. Somebody that's interested and dives into that and spends the required time to learn those rules, and as they change, stay up with those changes. That's a really difficult thing for anybody to do that hasn't got that kind of background. So yes, you could hire, the statute says you can. It sometimes means you're doing two things. But the treasurer's duties in the statute don't include accounting. They're cash management and their debt management and all those things. So you can take a look at that and say, we really want our treasurer to do these statutory things. We really want the governmental accountant to do these other things. You can do that as a select board easy. There's going to be a crossover where they're going to do the same thing that and so you should mirror those to see that they actually came to the same results.
Correct.
But the rest of it is really
separate.
It took me a while to figure out governmental accounting. That's what I do for work. So it's not easy for somebody that doesn't stay up on all those rule changes. By the way, GASB is up to 120 rules. So if you haven't spent all the time, nothing about GASB 34 is now GASB 129. So there's a whole bunch of rule changes every year, just like tax law. And if you don't stay up with that, it's hard to actually be totally correct in that environment. Now, I'm not saying you should hire a bookkeeper or an accountant, but you can. And I think you, as a group, should say, what are we looking for from these financial documents? What are we looking for controls over the financial transactions? And who is best suited, cost versus benefit, of the town?
Exactly.
You
That's
make that decision.
It's the probability thing you were talking about,
Yeah.
right? It's how much do you reduce the disparities versus how much are you paying to get them reduced?
Correct. And we
it's
listen to
gotta
him
match.
during the day, answer questions from everybody in the office. She obviously knows a lot about the town. She obviously knows a lot about transactions. So it's not that she's not capable of doing that. I think she would be benefited from going to some training and having a very specific set of things to think about that would help in the audit process, that would help in the office and the segregation of duty and all that sort of stuff.
You really haven't found anything nefarious. You so far these have all been process errors, and things that we can do better, and things that we should do better.
Yes. So there's a difference between forensics and fraud. So forensics is going in and looking and seeing that there's stuff that's in the wrong bucket and needing to be put in the right bucket. Wrong silo and you put in the right silo. Fraud is the intent to deceive in a financial setting. So forensically, we've seen some stuff we'd like to see you change. Tweaks to the system, the controls. But nefarious, the fraud part of that, we haven't seen that yet.
That's good.
Did you, was that, are we toward the end of the bullet items?
Yep.
So, did you get a chance to look at the previous clerk's transactions?
We're not back that far in the calendar yet, no. But that's on our list of things to do, yes. And we understand that there's some records that are in the state police office, so I probably would ask for those too, just to kind of start out someplace other than zero. To get a sense of that, just to start from a better spot than zero.
I don't have a lot of information about it, other than that's where the rumors have been pointing for years, so that's probably where we should look.
Jeff, question. You had mentioned with the accounting rules. Is there a risk when we depreciate items early?
No. So, and this is the tough part about governmental versus for-profit accounting. So yours, water and sewer, are considered user fee oriented. And because they're user fee oriented, they use the financial accounting standards. But because you charge taxes based on a value, that's the governmental accounting part of it. So in for-profit accounting, when I buy a vehicle, or I buy a computer, or I buy a copier, I can't take the cost, in theory, from a financial statement perspective, all in 1 year, because it has a useful life into the future. So I ratably take what I think the obsolescence is over a period of time. So on your water and sewer parts of your stuff, you do take depreciation because that's required. But it's a non-cash item, and many times you're really paying a bond principal payment and not actually writing a check for depreciation. So you'd have to look at those two and say, we paid $100,000 in bond principal, and we're going to take a certain dollar amount different than that for the depreciation, because you probably are paying the bond off quicker than that building becomes obsolete, or that pumping station becomes obsolete.
What about with like capital purchases like trucks and stuff?
So if they're in the water and sewer area, you depreciate them. If they're for the roads, the general roads of the town, you don't. That's the difference between for-profit and governmental. Financial accounting standards.
So we don't wind up, I guess, losing money out of the budget because we weren't able to depreciate and take that
So you
as a loss.
You have sort of a debt service component as opposed to a depreciation component.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah.
Surprising.
Okay.
It's another question would be, do you have an anticipated timeline for finishing the rest of the forensic audit?
I'd be lying if I told you I knew the date, so I try not to do that. But I can tell you that we're back at it, and personal stuff's out of the way, and Dave and I will be here very regularly, getting a lot of progress done, as opposed to very little progress done.
Okay, all right.
And I can certainly update you in the next. Well, how about if I do this? Between now and the 31st of December, I'll tell you exactly where I think we are, and give you a timeline for finish.
Oh, that'd be great.
That would be great. Have that this year.
I'm sorry, it was between now and when?
The
December
31st. We should have a really good idea of exactly where we're headed with all the final.
Don't tell us too late on the 31st, because I think some of us will be drunk.
Okay.
Are you talking about personal experience?
Well, no, not me.
Well, you better not be. You're like
I don't
35
drink.
years sober.
30, actually.
Yeah, but he said he thinks.
Okay, so one last topic. So think about this, the mechanics of these numbers. So if you have a delinquent tax collector who gets the full 8% of what you're collecting, and on top of that, you're paying the payroll taxes for that person, municipal retirement costs for that, the sending out of the invoices, and all the stuff that goes along with that. The town has not collected any money towards those. And so you've paid out the full 8% in compensation, but you still have probably another 10, 15, 20% on top of that to pay outside of, in your budget, but outside of the collection. So do you want to consider paying hypothetically 5% of the 8% and keeping the other 3% to pay for all those costs? Because right now, 8% is collected, probably 14, 15% is going out because of all those other associated costs of payroll taxes, municipal benefits, the actual operating cost to send that stuff out. So in this piece of stuff here, I'm looking at your budget and saying you're getting 8% in and you're spending 8% out, and that's what you think. But then when you add in all the other stuff, you're really probably spending 14 or 15%, 13, 14%.
I thought I've seen in the statement line items, specific line items under the delinquent tax collectors numbers, code numbers, for payroll taxes, a line item for, I think it's called mail expenses. Am I correct?
Right, the town is paying. The town is paying to mail out all that stuff. So you're paying to mail out the delinquent tax bills and mileage and different things.
Payroll taxes, all that other stuff.
All the payroll taxes. So
instead
do it
of
in a
it
dollar
being a
amount. So
wash-
say
It's 30,000.
say $100, or say $1,000 is your delinquent tax fee. Bob pays it. I turn it in and say, okay, I've now collected $1,000 in delinquent taxes. Jeff's going to give me a paycheck for $1,000. And now the town has to pay my municipal retirement and my payroll taxes on that. So the town just lost money.
So it's 14% on top of that?
So
14 instead of 8.
Yeah.
Right.
So you brought in $30,000 in delinquent taxes in the 18, 19 year. You spent $30,000 in commission payments. $30,000 times 7.65% went off to the IRS, Social Security. Another dollar amount went off to the Vermont Unemployment. Another dollar amount went off to Vermont VEMOS. And then the post office got a bunch of money, and then all the supplies needed to send all that stuff out all came out of the budget here. So you didn't really have a trade-off of 8 for 8. You had a trade-off of 8 coming in and 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 going out.
Okay.
So it's not uncommon for the group to think about those things and say, okay, do we want it to be a net zero to the town? Or do we mind paying that extra freight on top of the 8% in compensation? So that's just one of those things that I would say to you in our work is most towns probably don't want to take a whole bunch of money out of their pocket for the delinquent tax collection. And you are. You're definitely paying.
I think the interpretation is it was costing the town nothing. It was an in and an out.
It's certainly not that.
Because otherwise, why would you have a delinquent tax collector? Because couldn't the town actually collect the delinquent taxes and
get collected?
And benefit
It's like a
from? Can I finish, please? Why couldn't the town then collect the delinquent taxes and gain as revenue the delinquent fees, as opposed to paying out the delinquent fees plus another 8% on top of it?
There's a whole bunch of different business models, but do you want to pop in?
Well, I was just going to say that the reason you have it is you need somebody doing that work.
Right.
I mean, you could say that it's kind of like the eliminate the middleman argument, but the middleman provides value.
Right.
And you can't eliminate a middleman.
You have to do that before you can go to tax sale and all those other statutory things that go along with it.
But it doesn't mean it couldn't be an employed person doing that.
You are entitled per the statute to have that as one of your models, yes.
Okay.
Right, but then you're paying for an employee. You're paying that person instead of wherever we're paying, and it may not be a net win.
Well, it depends. I mean, that person could be doing a whole bunch of different things to help.
Well,
the operations up, but
let
thank
me
you for
ask.
that information.
How far back did you go on that? Just a year? Or?
Yeah, so everything we've done so far is 18, 19.
Okay.
And into the 1920, because we've got plenty of work all the way into September, October.
So, do you know what the dollar amount is in addition to the 8% that the town took in that we paid out? What the difference was?
So,
7.65, 4.1.
so you brought in 30 and you spent 30 in compensation. On top of the 30 in compensation, you probably had another $6,000 or $7,000.
Okay.
And that's an estimate, but that's a pretty close, tight number.
And how back, how
That's
far
hot.
back
That was
are
just
you going
last
to be
year.
looking?
Just last
6 is our contract, 6 years.
6 years,
Yeah.
so.
And that also would say goes back to them cutting a hold of VEMR's as well, saying whether those were actually qualified as wages to
Right.
be
Yeah.
qualified as VEMR's.
So VEMR's position is, it's today going forward, as opposed to looking back and making changes and giving you money back. Unless there's fraud, and then that's a whole different scenario. So the discussion that I had with Jennifer Grace was, let's figure out what we have today, let's figure out what we have on file from 1975 or whatever last year was that those questionnaires were sent in, and come back to you with whether it's going to stay that way, exactly as has been filed, or whether there's some change that you decide to do collectively that you, whatever that would be. But I think if you go back into the 7.65% for payroll taxes, the dollar amount that gets put in it, 4% I think it is for your VEMR's.
4.165,
Yeah.
it's high.
Yep. The cost of
Wow.
mailing.
Health insurance in yours?
Well, but that's already over
That's-
as the other part of,
Yeah, that's sort of the treasurer's side.
4.165 match when most
And then
places only do a
unemployment,
3%
so on
match.
top of that. So if
Right,
you
but
add
that's
all
the
those
state
up,
mandated
6,000 to
rate.
7,000
Oh,
is a
that's
pretty
true.
reasonable number on top of the 30, 6,000 or 7,000 more. And we can narrow that number
For 6
I can do
years,
the
that's
math and
36,000.
give that to you. I
Remember, we
did have
still have
something else.
At admin fees, I have a question about that. So in each budget, the transfer station, the wastewater treatment facility, and the town garage or the highway department, there's a line item for administrative support.
Yes.
And that's a revenue that gets swept July 1. There's 10,000 in the road budget,
Mhm.
2,500 in wastewater.
Mhm.
Was it 1250 in the transfer station? Roughly, so it's about $14,000. So theoretically, if that's coming in for admin support, for support that the administrative secretary provides, is that added, are you able to identify, is that added to the budgeted salary amount? Or should that be coming in, should the budgeted salary amount be less 14,000 and then that makes it whole?
So by statute, you're required to have road different from operating fund. So what happens is all of the payrolls get paid out of the operating fund. But a lot of the work is for the road piece, the statutory part of the road piece, and anything else that you might have. Grant monies, anything that you want to assign a cost of payroll to or assign a cost of overhead to. So if you think about the teeter-totter, revenues goes up and expenses go up. So you're not really earning any new money. There's no swapping of dollars
Right.
that are net increase to you. All you're doing is increasing the cost in one silo and increasing the revenues in the other.
Right.
So in the end, if I take your numbers and I just round them off, you're getting $15,000 worth of revenues in the general fund, and you have $15,000 worth of the same expense in those other places. And when you look at it, could you operate the transfer station without somebody doing the accounting? No. Could you operate the road without somebody doing accounting? No. Why? Because you have payrolls and you have all those other things. So it's an acknowledgement that you have different funds that should stand by themselves. And the operating fund is typically the deep pockets. So everything gets paid out of the operating fund, but then you allocate over to road and you allocate over to transfer station and anything else. So that net is still zero. The revenues equal the expenses, and it's still zero. The same money that came in from the tax revenues is all the money you have to operate. But everybody sort of wants to see the silo be correctly indicative of how much it costs to operate that silo. So you're charging administrative costs, you're charging treasurer's fees, that sort of stuff, to the roads and to the transfer station.
So even though
But
they're
how do you know it's accurate?
So we see the entry that records 10,000 in revenue to the general fund and 10,000 expense to the
Right,
road.
but how do we know that we really did $10,000 worth of work to the road, where wastewater, we're doing the quarterly billing, and they're only giving us 2,500?
So
Right,
that-
how do we
that's-
know it's balanced correctly?
So that would be the question that you would ask at budget time. How do you know that you spent $2,500 or 10,000?
Because I don't think we can tell when we're looking at the budget statements.
Yeah.
I don't believe, and I haven't been able to figure it out, that when the money is swept and comes in, I don't see where it's a match, where it comes in as a revenue to the salary fund line item.
I can show you.
I don't know where it's going into and then how it's being paid out of, like, what is it being used for?
So remember I talked about adjusting journal entries before
Mm-hmm.
and how that stuff gets, changing account balances?
Yes.
So your adjusting journal entry log that's inside of NEMRIC actually has that entry that says, we're taking it out of Fund 100 and putting it into Fund 200. Taking it out of 100, putting it into 300.
So that was the report we were talking about that we could request, okay.
So there's typically nothing wrong with the journal entry itself, other than it doesn't have that layer of authorization to it. And so you would see in that log of 200 adjusting journal entries from July to June, that 10,000,
Those
that
sweeps.
2,500, right? Yes.
I do want to take full advantage of your time here,
Sure.
but I did want to point out that it's 10 o'clock and we have an executive session still scheduled for tonight.
I
So I'm
don't
not
think
sure
we
where
can.
we are.
I don't think we can have that because Mr. Fisher's unavailable. You were at the table when he came in. He has a family emergency.
Okay, we should have the executive session anyway, because don't we need to talk about what we're going to be doing on Monday, even if it's just as a board, and getting some information from our town agent as to what she collected? Why would we not do that?
That's fine.
I think we can still do that. I think it just means we won't be as long.
Okay, well, that's good.
And we won't have the lawyer here.
Yeah, we won't have.
But anyway, let's
Yep.
finish up with Mr.
Because my
Graham
question
and
is
Mr.
just like
Ross.
trying to allocate, could the clerk try to give us an idea of how many hours it takes us to do certain things so they could budget better for wastewater versus, because that's where we're like,
So my recommendation would be, what's your total hours available to you? Pick the number, they're gonna pick the number. 1,040 is 20 hours a week, 2,080 is a full year, take away holidays, vacations, probably looking at 1,700 hours or whatever that magic is. If a person's working 40 and half that, if they're working half days. And say, slice the pie for us. How much do you think you spend on A, B, C, D, and E, and then allocate those based on those costs.
Should we have time cards that are broken out allocating hours to those line items?
So I'm
For
a
traceability?
big believer in time cards regardless, because there's a whole bunch of Department of Labor rules that really come right back to time cards. You certainly need that when you're in the road crew for a lot of Department of Labor rules and all the stuff that goes along with it. In the office, the administrative and elected officials may or may not like that concept, but that's a mechanism available to you to figure out what their time is allocated to so that you can put it into the right budget number. It's as simple as having 10 work codes and saying work code number 1 is what I did today, or half the day today, and work code number 2 is the other half. And having something to fall back so that you can use that for budget, or any other thing that comes up that might be Department of Labor related. Having gone through a couple of Department of Labor audits, the stuff that you don't have is problematic in law.
May I ask another question?
Sure.
Just because what you just said reminded me, line items. We've been told numerous times that that the financial system can't accommodate specific line items for true transparency. So in other words, if we wanted to have line items created for mileage, conference fees, travel expenses like airfare and stuff like that, we break it down to that level. We were told, no, you can't do that. We have to have as few as possible, which is why we see cell phone bills paid out of the training fund.
So I would say the first answer, that's not correct, because we audit a lot of financial statements of municipalities that have hundreds, if not thousands, of accounts. And the question is, how many of those do you want to budget for, and how many of those do you want to audit through? How important is it to keep track of $12 versus $22,000? And so that part of it is easy to add. You can literally add accounts on the fly. If you said we want to charge this specifically to airfare to the National GFOA conference, the Government Finance Officers Association conference, you could add a line to that and do it like in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So
While you're doing it in NEMRIC?
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be set up
No.
at the beginning of the budget year?
No.
Okay.
But like he said, it comes down to, do you want to have 500 line items, each one only being $20?
Yeah,
Well,
right, so
I
it's
mean,
a,
yeah,
it's a
we have
matter
to
of,
level
the
that
same
out.
auditor can give you both statements. You can hear from an auditor that you need to roll things up and you need to break them out. Because if, for example, you've got pencils, pens, sticky notes, he's gonna tell you to roll them up into office supplies.
Correct. Right.
But if you've got your computer and your snowplow
Right.
and the cabinets
Right.
all rolled up, he's gonna tell you to break them out, and he can tell you the same thing in the same audit. So, because I keep hearing we need to be more specific, but that's not necessarily true. I'm hearing we were told to roll things up, we were told to break things out. Both can be true. You need to be
it's a
account
little bit
specific.
of both. Small items you
Yes.
can bundle together, but the big stuff you should break apart.
So
Right,
we
like
would
mileage
use,
and stuff should be mileage.
we would use the concept of materiality.
Yeah.
If you saw an account with $24 in it, how long would you spend in that account? If you saw an account with $122,000 in it, how long would you spend on that account? Does $24 impact your budget, or does $122,000 impact your budget?
Right.
So if you got too many things in $122,000, maybe you want to break those out. If you got something in $24 in total, nobody's going to really
Right.
care about that.
My only point was that we can't make the broad statement, right?
Right.
You have to look at the accounts and say, these need to be broken
Yeah.
out, those need to be rolled up, this needs
Right.
to be
We
broken out.
have to go item by item and
Right.
figure out what's there and then make the decision
Well,
one by one.
You also want clarity, because when the community members, when they're looking at how their tax dollars are spent, when you look at the fund, and I'm gonna use the training and education fund, you assume if all the money that's budgeted in the training and education fund every year is spent in every single budget, what does that tell you as a community member? Oh, everybody must be going to all this great training and they must be really smart at what they do. Then you find out that there's zero money spent in the training and education budget, and all the money in it was spent on mileage, cell phone bills,
But
and
that's not.
miscellaneous.
But that's not breaking out of accounts. That's misuse of accounts. You actually got an account that's
Mislabeling.
mislabeled.
Right.
Right.
Right,
So,
which-
is different.
Right.
Different than do you roll it up or break
Which
it out.
when we
my
go through
point-
the budget, I think we should be relabeling the accounts then.
To my
That's
to
true.
my
And how do we
point,
know how it was spent?
have the
Yeah.
account for training and education, make sure only things related to going to training is in there. If you're spending money on mileage, it should be coming out of a line item called mileage,
Right.
not guessing.
What if we're paying a credit card or something late?
Oh,
What is
yeah.
the odds of, say one
Fees.
department, one department spends the money, the bill's paid late, the next month, whoever's money is spent, that late fee and interest sometimes is buried into your account versus on a fines and interest.
Right.
I don't know,
So you make the decision about what's important to you. This group, whatever, 1 year, 3 years, whatever you got for, you make the decision of what's important to you, and you ask for those sorts of clarity items. The next group that comes in after you may not. The auditors may not. All that stuff comes down to materiality. So what's material to you? $50, $1,000, $20,000? You pick the number and you say, if we start to see those kinds of activities in our books, we'd like to see them discreetly presented so everybody knows that there is educational costs and travel to get there and back in that account. And did we send somebody this year or not? And if not, why? What were the reasons for that?
So there could be a sub-line within the education for travel or
For education,
product
mileage,
expenses
and
for books.
right, like
or-
we could have auditor's expense and subbed underneath it could be our travel, our
Right.
training, our reimbursements.
So-
And then it could be all rolled into one total.
So
Right.
your things are set up by 3 digits with a dot and 4 digits with a dot.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, a dash. 2 digits with a dot and 2 digits. So hypothetically 10.00 could become 10.01, 10.02, 10.03. When you run your report, all the dots roll up into the 10. And,
Right.
and it's all the education related costs. But if you
Right.
wanted to find out travel versus registration fees versus expenses for meals or whatever, you could run .1, .2, .3.
Right.
And it will give you all that stuff.
Same with like your utilities, you could have
Yes.
Yes.
a light bill, fuel bill.
But you generally
You
have
can do
a
it by
code
building.
for
Correct.
each.
You can do it by building, by meter.
logistic.
Correct.
All those things, yes.
Because even in the budget that we looked at, the mileage wasn't even related to training, it was just mileage
Mhm.
to go to Manchester, to go to that transfer station to run something up there. So, you know, even
That
though
was
it-
town business.
Right, it was,
Right.
yeah. The fines and interest, I know that you're saying that the dollar amount is really what matters, but to Crystal's point, when you have a fine because you paid a credit card late, and the charge was from one budget, and you find the fine or the fee for that late payment buried in another budget's line item, like the charge came out of wastewater treatment, but the penalty for paying it late was buried and found in the highway department road fund. Even though it might have only been $50, and that might be the only $50 that lands in fines and interest or penalty or whatever, shouldn't it still be under wastewater treatment?
So I think
So there's
some
a
of
connection?
the answer that I would give you is intent, error, materiality, all of the above. So if you knew that purposely was put someplace else because that other budget was already at its max, that's probably not appropriate, because you should really, a fact is a fact is a fact.
Should show truths.
Yeah. So if you've got $12 and it's posted someplace else, again, what's material to you? If you've got $600 on a fine because it was paid late, you might think that that's material to you, and you want to find out why, because it's $600 of sort of wasted town taxpayer money.
Right.
So you come back to the transaction, you come back to the thought process of the person, you come back to, can we correct it before the next issuance of the next set of financials, so that it's in the proper place? And that's where you all come in, and auditors come in, and outside auditors come in. That's
Well, it falls into interpretation.
Yeah.
I mean, because right now, if you look at I'm gonna just use maintenance, 'cause that's what I do, but, so I have a salary of $50,000, okay? And so I fix things in this building. Well, if I gotta go to the line item, the way it's broken down, there's $8,000 for AOT, and then another $6,000 for wastewater, $4,000 for the transfer station. Now everybody thinks that I'm making total that on top of the 50,000, when I'm actually only making the 50,000, and that's the misconception. The way it's, that's or the perception when they look at the town thing, because it's all falls under building maintenance category.
So there's an allocation component.
And that's, I guess, the breakdown that we need to be able to take and let people know.
So when you set up the payrolls for everybody that's here,
Yes.
somebody has already put in, take the $50,000 and allocate it to 1, 2, 3, 5 departments.
Right.
You can run the allocation report inside of NEMRIC that tells you of the 50, how much is going to go to general fund, how much is going to go to roads, how much is going to go to transfer station, whatever it might be that you want to separate it out. And that document could then be the explanation to whoever's asking, what was the $50,000 spent for? And you could go right through that allocation thing and say 12% was spent here, 24% someplace else, 20%, and here's where the numbers show up in the financials.
That was called the NEMRIC allocation report?
It's an
And
allocation report inside.
now that would be done per
Inside of
coding,
payroll.
I would
That's what?
imagine.
Inside of payroll.
So if this building would have a separate code, so if I did 8 hours today, it would be coded for this building versus whatever site it was.
Yeah.
It would have a separate code, therefore that would break it out of that account.
So you could have maintenance for the office, town office. You could have maintenance for the transfer station. You could have maintenance for the maintenance building.
Right.
You could have whatever you want. You could.
Right.
You could
You have
set that
you have a code for maintenance and a subcode for each building. And that way because you were asking before, is how do we know where,
Right, how do we know
to break it down.
$2,500 is enough money being allocated from wastewater treatment to
Right.
cover the quarterly billing? And how do we know that $10,000 out of the highway department is the correct dollar amount? Or could it be $8,000 truly for the highway and 4,500 from wastewater, but we
Right.
don't
Yeah,
know
we don't
that
know how
right
it's
now.
broken
We don't know
down,
how,
so.
we don't really know that true number.
So if you're the person that was allocating your time to all those things, that would come to you and say, of the 50 that you make, what percentage of the time do you spend? Or
Right.
historically.
I guess that's where the time card codes would come in.
Yeah.
Correct, because
Yeah.
right now it's just, we don't know, we don't have that information.
And there are a lot of
So a
folks,
time and attendance system would help.
going back to the cost versus benefit, there are a lot of folks that say, well, okay, we can get to the end and we could be $600 closer,
Mhm.
but how much time is involved in
Right, to
getting the
tighten
person
it
You
up.
don't wanna spend $20,000 to
Right.
recoup 600.
Yeah.
Right,
Right.
but you also
True.
wanna make sure that the right budget is being charged the right dollar amount and that it's not
Right.
incorrect.
I just wanna, it sounds to me like we're repeating some of the same stuff.
Right.
So I
Yes,
we do.
well, the reason why I did it because there's, the
Oh, it wasn't
full
directed
answer
at you.
wasn't, no, the full answer wasn't given when and I didn't know if it just wasn't asked. That's why I asked it a different way, or gave a different example, but I know a few people have said, geez, this person must make $70,000 because they make this salary.
No, I've
and
got-
then it's
I've-
and I'm like, no, it's just the way it's broken down. Well, how can you prove it?
I've
And
received the
I
same-
really don't know how it's broken down within the town, so I can't give them that part of the answer.
The example would be the pie costs 50,000.
Right.
And each slice has a different cost associated with it, and
Right.
it all equals the 50 grand.
So that's, thank you.
No, that wasn't directed at you, Harry. That
No,
was the
I'm just-
general comment is that
yeah.
we've talked about the need to be more precise.
Yep.
More precise, and I just want to make sure that we weren't getting
So-
caught up on one thing.
No.
Before you go, just a quick question. Has there been any errors or anything that you've identified that you've been asked not to bring to our attention or that we should know about?
No, and I've had the conversations before about we give you the good and the bad, and that's just part of the sort of rules that we bring to the table.
Mhm.
We're going to tell you all that stuff.
Okay.
That's what we wanted.
Right.
Right.
That's
Yeah,
why we
that's
hired
it.
you. We
Right.
wanted to know everything.
And I talked about it today and just said to Ellen, because she was upset about something that happened in the office, and I said, well, in concept, I should hear everybody's requests. I should hear everybody's questions. I think in fairness to me and in fairness to this group that hired me, that's what I'm here for, is to listen and understand everybody's issues that they want me to go embark on. And I mean, I think that whole conversation went a long way towards allowing us to do our job a little bit easier without that antagonistic part.
Mhm.
And I would hope that, I guess Bob was saying he thought maybe it was okay. I hope that Ellen would say that too, because I think in the end, we had a pretty good conversation about why we're here, what we're doing, what it's not, what it is, what things we need to do in order to do our job. And I understand that it's angst causing. I don't want it to be, so I'm trying to do my job to keep that angst level down. And I think today went a long way towards helping that.
Right. Because I mean, if we don't know what's broken, we can't help fix it. We can't provide guidance. And that's what we expect. We expect that from our internal auditors, that if they find errors, that they let us know. Because if it means we need to bring in somebody for training, we needed to bring in the NEMRIC people. I know that we had a conversation with Julie when we had the auditors meeting with her 2 weeks ago. And she informed us that she's never had formal NEMRIC training. She's only learned what 2 people have taught her, and she feels she would definitely benefit if we were able to get NEMRIC down here to provide like a global
Well, before we
training.
create a perception, this is still open meeting.
Right.
I want to make it clear that our clerk does a lot of training and works pretty closely with the
Yeah, she admitted that when we were talking, that
Yeah.
she would love, in our open meeting that
In our
we had.
open meeting, Patricia was there, that she would
No,
love.
that's fine. I just want to make sure that because it's coming off sounding like she doesn't do much training.
No,
I don't
no,
want
we meant on NEMRIC.
No, she
Just
said that
within
she
NEMRIC.
wasn't
She would benefit from
provided-
NEMRIC.
She wasn't
Right.
provided
Okay.
training from NEMRIC, that she was taught by Linda and Ellen, and she felt that she could learn so much more and could use the system so much better. And that the auditors would benefit from that as well, if we had formal NEMRIC training, because
Right.
David, you've never gone to NEMRIC, you've never had formal NEMRIC training, and you've audited for 4 years. And correct me if I'm wrong,
We would all
last
benefit
month
from
was
NEMRIC training.
last month was the very first time that you guys got access to certain accounts in order to produce those reports that you learned about when you went to training.
So there's two parts of that. There's the software part, and then there's the accounting knowledge part. And I can tell you there's a lot of accounting knowledge parts that happen between the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, Vermont Government Finance Officers, the Treasurers and Clerks Associations. All the initials that you can come up with, they're all around and they all do that sort of stuff. So feel free to have them reach out and find out what's there. And if it's NEMRIC software, that's going to be helpful because NEMRIC is based on a lot of the rules that they're going to get in those other seminars.
Right.
So that's a sort of a double-edged, not double-edged sword. But two things done at one time. NEMRIC training will also give a lot of accounting training on the road.
So I mean, that
Two-prong.
would be really,
Thank
really
you.
good for
Sure.
everybody.
It's late.
One more question I have, I'm not sure if you can answer it or not. Can you help us with our policies not matching our procedures when it comes to payroll?
Yeah, and it's an important part of that, I think. So that accounting document that I talked about early on, that would really be helpful because the accounting document would say in NEMRIC software. So the accounting manual can't be designed on an island because you then have to implement it with the software that you have available to you. So NEMRIC software and the procedures should be tied to NEMRIC software as long as you use it. So that concept of the 5 types of sign-offs and the different groups that are looking at that should all be built into that process of entering and checking and making sure that the numbers are where you want them to be and get allocated in the pie correctly and all that stuff that goes along with it. So yes, it's a easy fix if that's one of the things you're looking for.
Because we've all been trying to get some clarity and make those match.
Right. Because we want to make sure that how accruals set up in NEMRIC match what the policy says.
Yep.
Have you looked at any of that?
So I've got a list of items. I was writing a lot of that down today when I was going through those pages. There are some standard adjustments for accruals for payroll-related stuff. And part of my notes are to go back and test each one of those to be sure that, because if one's correct, they're all going to be correct. That's just the way the software works. And in terms of where they go in the ledger account numbers, the dollar amounts may not be correct and the accounts could be correct or vice versa, but that's on my list of things that I've looked at. So there's probably 20 different accounts, 25 different accounts that are affected by those standard adjusting entries for accruals for payrolls. And that's part of what I was looking at today. And I don't see anything wrong with the structure. The numbers behind it might not be correct.
Okay.
And what I was really looking for was the timing of those. Because you have a lot of entries posted in August for the previous June year end, in July for the previous June year end. And so those are appropriate in many cases, but I just want to make sure that in all cases, if you're going to post something into July or August for the previous year, that it really is the right kind of entry. So I was going through and doing my little matrix of what got posted and what date was on it, so the timing is correct for your 18-19 year, or is it 19-20? They're all being posted in the calendar 19-20, but many of them, because your year hadn't been closed yet, many of them are, we call them month 13 postings. There's 12 months, but then the 13th one is sort of like the cleanup month. If they're posted as month 13 journal entries and they're dated July or August, or September or October, and they were month 13, they still go into the last year. So you get them all in before the audit happens, and you want those all in the right year before the audit happens, because otherwise your audit report is...
The cutoff is what, August 31st, so if something comes in that's after June,
So that's the
usually,
revenue side. But you could have expenses that show up in August.
she doesn't usually backdate anything after August 31st.
So there's a 60-day rule that has to do with availability of financial resources.
Okay.
So if you've billed taxes and you get them paid July 1st to August 31st after the year end, they're available to you to pay your normal operating expenses, and that's that 60-day rule. But if you got a bill from a vendor in September that was for work done in May, and you haven't closed your books, you should put it in 113 and have it go in because it was obligated in May.
I was say, I think we cut our stuff off, right, David? As
2
of
months.
August 30, we give 2 months.
It's not uncommon to do that, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. And so if it's a really large dollar amount, so I have a lot of anecdotal stories, I'll make this really quick. There was a certain town manager in Vermont that loved to have his drawer locked, and he put all the stuff in there that he didn't want anybody to see until the next fiscal year. And like July 10th, you pull them out and you say, okay, can now post these into the current year. Well, if you do that within 60 days and those things are all posted in, that's great. What happens if he does it at 65 days? So there's a whole pile of invoices that didn't get put into the previous year because his budget numbers didn't support it. So all that stuff is part of that controlled network. If you see an invoice coming in now that was dated May, you might want to ask why. And I'm not saying that that's happened, but that would be the concept.
So I know we got one in September.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That's one thing, Ellen goes through and does that, and then she sends it to us to go through and verify that she's correct, or that we find something that we have a question about.
Right.
But in reality, we only find maybe one a year. There's not much, because it's such a cut and dried procedure.
And so if you find one a year, that's a great control system that's working.
It is.
And you want that to extend to everything that you've got going on, where you can keep that control network strong. Yeah, agreed.
Okay. And everything looks good, you haven't, any concerns about standard practices not being applied, or any accounting rules not being applied, or anything we need to worry about?
So that was part of my discussion with Ellen today. I like to understand all of the dynamics of all the transactions before I jump off that bridge without that hypothetical parachute.
Okay.
So there are some things on our watch list that are tweaks to the system, not major failures to the system. And I've talked about most of those things, actually, probably all of those things, unless I haven't really gone far enough to get everything. So in terms of what I'd like to see you do, yeah, there's a few things that I'll probably recommend that you do differently. Maybe some more checks, but process things slightly different. But there's no large item that really makes your financials inappropriately presented to you. And I may find that, may not find that in the rest of our work, but at this point, there's nothing I can tell you. I would tell you otherwise, but there's nothing I can tell you.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Are you going to be providing like a kind of written summary of this?
I was just gonna
Okay.
ask the same thing.
Because I don't know if I can summarize it all correctly.
Well, it's all on the, it's all on
Video.
It's all on Cat TV. You can just go watch the same 3 hours again.
I'm still a paper and pencil guy, so I put a lot of stuff there because then I remember it. But it gets into a report,
Okay.
for sure.
Thank you.
That's all right.
Thank you.
Great.
You're welcome.
Well, if there's
Thank you
nothing
very
else,
much.
I think these two gentlemen probably would
Wanna get
wish to go home.
Mhm.
Or at least to
Thank
their
you.
motel room at this hour.
We're
Or
headed
just
home.
out to their car.
Thanks a lot.
You're
Bye
welcome.
guys,
That was
thank
great.
you.
Okay, thank you very
Executive
much.
session
I'll second that with, for legal, for our personnel.